Hey there, I'm Sophia, a 35-year-old single mom just trying to make sense of this crazy world. It's just me, my amazing 12-year-old daughter, Emily, and our little home in the suburbs. It might not be fancy, but it's ours. I work as a nurse, putting in long, grueling shifts to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. Emily is a special kid, sharp as a tack and bursting with creativity. She's got this wild curly hair that could give Rapunzel a run for her money, and she loves expressing herself through it. Then there's Gertrude, my ex-mother-in-law and constant headache. She's a 68-year-old widow who lives far too close for comfort. Sure, she helps out with Emily after school, but her nagging drives me up the wall. Sophia, don't you think Emily's hair is a bit wild? Gertrude's voice grates on my nerves as I hurry to get ready for work. I take a deep breath. It's just hair, Gertrude. She likes it that way. In my day, young ladies knew how to present themselves properly. She huffs. I bite my tongue, reminding myself that beggars can't be choosers when it comes to free childcare. Thank God for Sarah, my best friend and fellow nurse. She's my anchor, always there to listen or lend a hand with Emily when Gertrude becomes unbearable. Girl, I don't know how you deal with that old bat, Sarah says over coffee one day. You've got the patience of a saint. I laugh. Trust me, it's running thin. Then there's Michael, my neighbor. He's a total sweetheart, always offering to help around the house. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't noticed how he looks at me. But after everything with Emily's dad, I'm in no rush to dive back into the dating scene. Hey, Sophia, need a hand with that? Michael calls out as I fumble with some boxes in the driveway. Thanks, Michael, you're a lifesaver, I say, trying not to notice how his shirt clings to his arms as he lifts the box. Life isn't perfect, but with good neighbors and the occasional handsome handyman, it's not all bad. The real drama in my life is the constant tug-of-war with Gertrude over how to raise Emily. Emily, sit up straight, a lady doesn't slouch, Gertrude scolded during dinner one night. I saw Emily's shoulders slump even more. Mom, do I have to listen to her? Emily asked, her eyes pleading with me. Just try your best, sweetie, I said, shooting Gertrude a sharp look. We all have different ideas about what's important, I added. Different ideas indeed, Gertrude muttered under her breath. If you just listened to me, Sophia, that child wouldn't be running wild. I clenched my fists under the table. Emily is not running wild, she's expressing herself, and I won't stifle that. Mark my words, Sophia, Gertrude said, her voice icy. Without proper discipline, that girl will end up in trouble. As I watched Emily retreat to her room, her wild curls bouncing behind her, I wondered how long I could keep this delicate balance. Something had to give, and when it did, it wasn't going to be pretty. I was dead on my feet after another grueling shift at the hospital. All I wanted was to hug my baby girl and collapse into bed. But the moment I stepped through the door, I knew something was wrong. Emily, sweetie, I'm home, I called out. But there was no answer, just an eerie silence that made my skin crawl. I found her curled up in bed, sobbing. When she looked up at me, my heart nearly stopped. Her beautiful curls were gone, every single one. Her head had been shaved clean. Mom, Emily wailed, throwing herself into my arms. Grandma, she did it while I was sleeping. I held her tightly, my mind spinning. Shoo, baby, it's okay. We'll fix this, I whispered, but inside, I was screaming. How could Gertrude do this to my child? Fury surging through me, I stormed into the living room where Gertrude sat, calm as ever. What the hell did you do? I shouted. She didn't even flinch. I did what needed to be done. That child was becoming far too vain and disobedient. Vain? Disobedient? She's a 12-year-old girl, I snapped. Precisely, Gertrude replied coolly. It's high time she learned some discipline. This isn't your day, Gertrude, I cut her off, shaking with rage. This is assault. I'm calling the police. Gertrude scoffed. Don't be dramatic. Sophia, I've put up with your lenient parenting long enough. Someone had to step in before Emily turned into a delinquent like her father. That's when I lost it. Get out of my house, now. Gladly, Gertrude sneered, gathering her things. Mark my words, you'll regret not heeding my advice. That girl needs a firm hand. as the door slammed behind her. The full weight of what had just happened hit me like a ton of bricks. I sank to the floor, tears streaming down my face. Then suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It was Michael at the door, his face full of concern. "Sophia, is everything okay?" I heard shouting. One look at me, and he knew it wasn't. "What happened?" he asked, his voice soft but urgent. I couldn't find the words. My throat tightened, and all I could do was point toward Emily's room. Michael walked in, and when he saw her, his eyes widened in shock. "Oh my God, who did this?" "Gertrude," I managed to choke out, my voice trembling with fury. His expression hardened. "That's it. I'm calling the police." "No," Emily cried, her voice breaking. "I don't want anyone to see me like this." She looked so small, so vulnerable. I pulled her into my arms, trying to soothe her. "It's okay, baby. We won't do anything you're not comfortable with," I whispered, my heart aching. Michael knelt beside us, his tone gentle. "Is there anything I can do?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "Sophia, what's going on? I got your missed call, and you sounded upset in the voicemail." Through my sobs, I tried to explain. "Gertrude, she shaved Emily's head." "That evil witch," Sarah exclaimed. "I'm coming over right now." In no time, Sarah burst through the door, her arms loaded with bags. "Okay, I've got hats, scarves, and some cute pixie-cut photos for inspiration. We're going to get through this," she declared, her voice filled with determination. Emily managed a weak smile as Sarah worked her magic, trying to salvage what was left of her hair, while Sarah busied herself with Emily. I sat down with Michael and told him the whole sordid history with Gertrude, the years of tension, the endless battles, and how I had let her get too close. "I can't believe I ever let that woman near Emily," I said, the guilt clawing at me. Michael squeezed my hand, his voice steady. "This isn't your fault, Sophia. You were just trying to do right by your daughter. You were doing your best." His words were comforting, but deep down, I knew this was far from over. Sarah chimed in, her voice firm. "The only person to blame here is that old bat, Gertrude." I nodded, but the guilt gnawed at me. How could I have been so blind? As the night wore on, Emily finally drifted into an exhausted sleep. Sarah and Michael insisted on staying, setting up camp in the living room. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I made a silent vow. Gertrude would pay for what she had done, one way or another. My baby girl deserved nothing less. The next few days were a blur of tears, anger, and sleepless nights. Emily refused to leave her room, let alone go to school. I called in sick, knowing she needed me more than anything. "Sweetie, you can't hide forever," I said gently, sitting on the edge of her bed. "I look like a freak." "Mom," Emily sobbed, "everyone's going to laugh at me." My heart shattered all over again. "No, baby, you're beautiful, inside and out. We'll get through this together." Our first stop was the police station, but it was a massive disappointment. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but since there was no physical harm, this is a civil matter," the officer said, barely looking up from his desk. "No physical harm?" I exploded, gesturing toward Emily. "Look at my daughter." But rules were rules, apparently. So, our next stop was a lawyer. "We can definitely pursue charges for emotional abuse," the lawyer explained, "and sue for damages, but it won't be easy." I didn't care. I was out for blood. Sarah was a rock through it all, helping me document everything, photos, timelines, you name it. She kept me focused. "We're going to nail that old witch to the wall," Sarah declared as we worked late into the night, and I was determined to make sure she was right. Meanwhile, Michael was working his own magic. "I've got a buddy who specializes in family law," he told me. "Top-notch guy. He's willing to take your case pro bono." I could have kissed him right then and there, but there was no time for that. Things were about to get even messier. It started with whispers at the grocery store, sidelong glances from neighbors, then came the calls from distant relatives. "Sophia, is it true you've been neglecting Emily?" my cousin asked, concern dripping from her voice. That's when it hit me. Gertrude was on the offensive. "She's telling everyone I'm an unfit mother," I raged to Sarah and Michael. "That witch is trying to turn the whole world against me." But Gertrude had underestimated me. I started digging, calling up old babysitters, family friends, anyone who'd ever interacted with her and Emily. The stories I uncovered made my blood run cold. Grandma said if I told you, she'd send me away to boarding school, Emily confessed one night, tears streaming down her face. She used to lock me in the closet when I misbehaved. I pulled her close, fury and guilt battling inside me. How could I have missed this? It's not your fault, sweetie, I assured her, holding back my own tears. But I promise you, Grandma will never hurt you again. With Sarah and Michael's help, we devised a plan. Hidden cameras went up around the house. We coached Emily on how to safely gather evidence if Gertrude tried to contact her. Remember, kiddo, Michael said, showing Emily how to use the voice recorder on her phone. If Grandma calls or comes over, hit this button right away. Emily nodded solemnly. I won't let you down, Mom. You can never let me down, baby, I said, hugging her tightly. We're in this together. As we finalized our preparations, a grim determination settled over me. Gertrude thought she could bully and manipulate her way to victory, but she had no idea what was coming. This mama bear was ready to fight, and I wasn't about to lose. All right, team, I said, looking at Sarah and Michael, let's take this witch down. The trap was set. Now all we had to do was wait for Gertrude to make her move, and when she did, we'd be ready. The day of the trial finally arrived, and my stomach churned with nerves. Emily squeezed my hand as we walked into the courtroom. You got this, Mom, she whispered. Our lawyer presented the mountain of evidence we had collected. The hidden camera footage was damning, showing Gertrude barging into our home, screaming threats at Emily. You ungrateful little brat. Her voice echoed in the courtroom. I'll teach you to disobey me. I saw the judge's face darken, but that was just the beginning. One by one, witnesses took the stand, former babysitters, family friends, even Emily's old piano teacher. Each one shared chilling stories of Gertrude's cruelty. Piece by piece, the case against her grew stronger, and I could see her smug confidence slowly crumbling. She told me if I didn't make Emily practice for 3 hours a day, she'd have me fired, the piano teacher testified. But the rail kicker came when Emily took the stand. My brave girl stood there, her voice trembling but resolute. Grandma said if I ever told Mom what she did, she'd make sure I was taken away, Emily said, her eyes welling up with tears. My heart shattered as I watched her speak, tears streaming down my face. How had I not seen this? Gertrude's lawyer tried to spin her as a concerned grandmother, but it was too late. The truth was out, and everyone could see it. When the judge finally announced his decision, I nearly collapsed from relief. This court grants a permanent restraining order against the defendant, he declared. Furthermore, significant damages are awarded for the plaintiff's therapy and emotional distress. It was over. Gertrude was out of our lives for good. Outside the courtroom, Gertrude approached us, tears in her eyes. Sophia, Emily, I'm so sorry, she began. I cut her off, my voice cold. Save it, Gertrude, you're dead to us. Without looking back, we walked away, and for the first time in years, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The next few months were tough, but we got through it together. Emily started therapy and, little by little, began coming out of her shell. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table with Sarah and Michael, Emily made an announcement. I want to donate the money from the lawsuit, she said, her voice steady, to help other kids like me. I couldn't have been prouder of her. As for me and Michael, well, let's just say he became a permanent fixture in our lives. His steady support through everything meant the world to us. But the real turning point came about 6 months after the trial. I think the question of whether some betrayals are unforgivable is deeply personal and complex. It really depends on the context of the betrayal, the nature of the relationship, and individual values and experiences. In cases where trust has been profoundly violated, like with Gertrude's actions, forgiveness can be incredibly difficult. Some people might find it hard to move past such deep hurts, and in those cases, the focus might shift to healing and moving forward rather than reconciliation. On the other hand, forgiveness can be a powerful tool for personal peace and growth. It doesn't always mean forgetting or reconciling, but it can be about releasing the hold that anger or resentment has on you. Sometimes, Forgiveness can even pave the way for personal transformation and a healthier future, even if it doesn't include the person who caused the harm. Ultimately, whether or not to forgive and how to handle betrayal is a personal decision. It's important to do what feels right for your own well-being and growth. Do you think there are certain boundaries that should never be crossed, or do you see forgiveness as a way to heal even the deepest wounds?
I stared at the iced tea dripping down my silk blouse, watching the amber liquid seep into the fabric like a growing bloodstain. The silence in the dining room was absolute, broken only by the soft plink of ice cubes hitting the hardwood floor. My name is Ruby, and this was the moment my mother-in-law decided to destroy my marriage. "Oh dear," Linda said, her voice dripping with false concern. My hand must have slipped. She placed the empty pitcher on the table with deliberate care, her manicured fingers lingering on the crystal handle. I could feel every eye in the room on me. Jake's bewildered stare, Melanie's poorly concealed smirk, even little Emily's wide-eyed shock from her booster seat. The Sunday roast lay forgotten, steam still rising from the perfectly arranged plates. "Let me help you clean up." Jake started to rise, but Linda's hand shot out, gripping his wrist. "Actually, before anyone moves, I have something that needs addressing." She reached into her designer handbag, pulling out a thick manila envelope. "These arrived yesterday, and I think now is the perfect time to discuss them." My stomach clenched as she slid the envelope across the table, leaving it just out of reach of the spreading tea puddle. I didn't need to open it to know what it contained. The familiar legal letterhead was visible through the paper. "Divorce papers," Linda announced to the room, as if introducing the next course. "Already filled out. All Jake needs to do is sign." I turned to my husband, searching his face for any sign of surprise, any hint that this was as much of an ambush for him as it was for me. But Jake wouldn't meet my eyes, suddenly fascinated by his untouched mashed potatoes. "You knew about this?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Ruby, honey," Linda cut in before Jake could respond. "Let's not make this more dramatic than it needs to be. We all know this marriage isn't working. Jake needs someone who understands family values, someone who can support his dreams instead of." She gestured vaguely at my tea-soaked appearance. "Whatever this is." Melanie snorted into her wine glass. "At least you didn't ruin one of your good outfits, Rubes." This one was clearly from the clearance rack. I stood up slowly, feeling the cold liquid running down my spine. "Jake," I said quietly, "look at me." He raised his head finally, and what I saw in his eyes told me everything. This wasn't a sudden decision. This wasn't even his mother's idea, not entirely. This was premeditated, calculated, and I'd been too blind to see it coming. 8 years, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. 8 years of marriage, and you let your mother dump iced tea on me before serving divorce papers. "It's not like that," he started, but I was already moving. I picked up my own glass of wine, a full-bodied red that Linda had been saving for a special occasion, and walked around the table with measured steps. Linda's smug expression faltered slightly as I approached. "You're right about one thing," I said, standing over her. "This marriage isn't working." I tipped the glass, watching the red wine cascade over her perfectly coiffed hair, down her expensive white blouse. "But you're wrong about who needs to understand family values." Emily giggled from her seat, quickly stifled by Melanie's sharp shush. I turned on my heel and walked toward the door, pausing only to grab my car keys from the entry table. Behind me, I could hear Linda's outraged sputtering and Jake's weak attempts to calm her down. "Ruby, wait," Jake called after me. I didn't wait. I didn't look back. But I made a promise to myself as I stepped into the evening air. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The hotel room keycard trembled in my hand as memories of our first date flooded back. Jake had worn that ridiculous blue tie with cartoon ducks on it, claiming it was his lucky charm. I'd found it endearing then, his nervous energy, his grand dreams of starting his own business empire. Now, 8 years later, that same tie hung in our closet, pristine and unworn, while my credit cards groaned under the weight of his failed ventures. My phone buzzed. Another message from Jake. "Please come home. We can talk about this." I tossed the phone onto the bed and started pacing. The same bed where I'd spent the last 3 hours scrolling through our joint bank accounts, watching our life together dissolve into a series of suspicious transactions and unexplained withdrawals. A knock at the door made me freeze. Ruby. Melanie's voice. I know you're in there. I considered ignoring her, but curiosity won out. When I opened the door, she pushed past me, reeking of expensive perfume and desperation. You're making a huge mistake, she said, dropping onto the room's single chair. Jake's a mess. Mom's furious. This isn't how family handles things. Family? I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Is that what we're calling it now? Don't be dramatic. So Mom got a little carried away with the tea thing. But you had to know this was coming. What Jake needs, I cut in, is to grow a spine. What he doesn't need is another enabler making excuses for his failures. Melanie's face hardened. At least he tries. All you do is judge him from your corporate ivory tower while he what? Burns through our savings? Takes out loans we can't afford? Tell me, Melanie, how many of his sure thing investments have you backed? She shifted uncomfortably. That's different. I believe in his vision. His vision? I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. You mean like the cryptocurrency mining operation that nearly burned down our garage? Or maybe the artisanal pickle business that lasted exactly 2 weeks? You never supported him properly, she snapped. If you just what? Keep working 60-hour weeks so he can chase pipe dreams with mommy's approval? I'm done being the family ATM. Melanie stood, smoothing her designer dress. Mom was right about you. You never deserved Jake. Funny, I was just thinking the same thing about him. I moved to open the door. Oh, and Melanie? That Cartier bracelet you're wearing? The one Jake gave you for your birthday? I paid for that too. She flushed, her hand automatically covering the bracelet. He said a lot of things. Now get out. After she left, I sat down at the small desk and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked accusingly as I logged into our joint accounts again. That's when I noticed something odd. A series of regular transfers to an account I didn't recognize, starting exactly 2 months after our wedding. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I dug deeper. Each transfer was labeled business investment, but the receiving account. I felt my stomach drop as I recognized Linda's bank. The amounts weren't huge, but over 8 years, they added up to nearly 6 figures. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Linda. I hope you're proud of yourself. Jake's devastated. Emily keeps asking where her Aunt Ruby is. If you had any decency, you'd sign those papers quietly and leave us in peace. I stared at the message, then back at the screen showing the transfer history. A cold clarity settled over me. They thought they had me cornered, humiliated, defeated. They expected me to slink away, sign their papers, vanish from their lives. Instead, I opened a new document and started typing. Every transaction, every failed business venture, every manipulative moment, I documented it all. Linda wanted peace. She was about to learn that peace came at a price, and I wasn't the one who would be paying it. The truth was a weapon, and I finally knew exactly where to aim it. The credit alert pinged on my phone while I was in a meeting with the company's board. My hands went numb as I stared at the notification. A loan approval for $50,000. A loan I never applied for. I excused myself, ignoring the concerned looks from my colleagues. In the hallway, I called the bank, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Yes, Mrs. Harrison, the loan was approved this morning. Your husband provided all the necessary documentation, including your power of attorney. Power of attorney. The words hit me like a physical blow. I remembered signing something last year, Jake insisting it was just a formality for his new business venture. It'll make things easier, he'd said, flashing that boyish smile that once made my heart flutter. My office phone was blinking when I returned, 3 messages from Linda. I deleted them without listening and opened my email instead. There it was, buried in my spam folder, a confirmation for a business registration. Harrison Family Ventures, LLC. Today's date. My name listed as guarantor. The knock on my office door made me jump. Ruby. It was my assistant, Sarah. There's someone here to see you. Says she's your niece. Emily stood in the reception area, her backpack clutched to her chest. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Aunt Ruby, she whispered. I didn't know where else to go. I ushered her into my office, closing the door on curious stares. Does your mom know you're here? She shook her head. Mom and Grandma are fighting. Uncle Jake came over and they're all yelling about money and papers and… She hiccuped. Mom said you stole from us. But that's not true, is it? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Melanie. I sent it to voicemail. Emily, sweetie, how did you get here? I took the bus. I remembered your building from when you showed me where you work. She pulled something from her backpack, a manila folder. I found this in Mom's room. She was crying over it last night. The folder contained bank statements, loan documents, and emails, dozens of them. Between Linda, Jake, and Melanie. Planning. Calculating. Using my income, my credit, my reputation to fund their schemes. You're not the bad guy, Emily said quietly. They are. My phone buzzed again. Jake this time. Where's Emily? Mel's freaking out. Call me. I looked at Emily, then at the documents spread across my desk. 8 years of manipulation laid bare by an 8-year-old's curiosity. Emily, I need to get you home. Please don't make me go back, she whispered. They're different when you're not there. Meaner. Grandma says terrible things, and Mom just agrees with everything, and Uncle Jake. My office phone rang. Linda's name flashed on the caller ID. I made a decision. Sarah, I called out, cancel my meetings for the rest of the day. I gathered the documents, tucking them into my briefcase. Emily, how do you feel about ice cream? Her face lit up, then fell. But Mom says. Your mom says a lot of things. I took her hand. Let's go make some new rules. In the elevator, I texted Jake, Emily's safe. With me. Don't worry, I'll document everything carefully. Just like you all did. The responses came rapid fire. Threats from Melanie. Guilt trips from Jake. Linda's message was just one line. You've gone too far. I looked at Emily, who was humming softly, her small hand still in mine. No, Linda. You all went too far. And now you're going to learn what happens when you push someone past their breaking point. Aunt Ruby. Emily's voice was small. Are you going to make them stop? I squeezed her hand. Yes, sweetheart. I'm going to make them stop. And I knew exactly where to begin. The folder in my briefcase wasn't just evidence of their betrayal. It was ammunition. They thought they were destroying me. Instead, they'd handed me everything I needed to tear their carefully constructed facade apart. Starting now. The police station's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows as I sat across from Detective Morris. Emily's folder spread between us. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, but my voice remained steady. Identity theft, fraud, unauthorized loans. Morris flipped through the documents. This is serious, Mrs. Harrison. But are you sure you want to pursue this? It's your husband we're talking about. Ex-husband, I corrected. And yes, I'm sure. My phone vibrated. Another message from Linda. You're making a terrible mistake. Think about Emily. That's exactly what I was doing. The detective's office door opened. Sarah, my assistant, rushed in, clutching her tablet. Ruby, you need to see this. She turned the screen toward me. Our company's internal homepage displayed a lengthy email from Jake to the entire board of directors. My stomach lurched as I read. Accusations of embezzlement, fabricated evidence of me stealing company funds, carefully doctored screenshots of transactions I'd never made. They're calling an emergency board meeting, Sarah whispered. Tomorrow morning. Detective Morris leaned forward. This complicates things. My laugh sounded hollow, even to my own ears. You think. A knock on the door made us all turn. Melanie stood there, mascara streaked down her face. Ruby, please. Mom's taken Emily. The world tilted sideways. What? She says she's protecting her from all of us. She won't tell me where they're going. Melanie's voice cracked. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know how far she'd go. Detective Morris was already on the phone, barking orders about an endangered minor. I gripped the edge of the desk, trying to stay upright as Melanie continued. The loans, the business ventures, they weren't Jake's idea. Mom's been planning this for years. She wanted to ruin you, make you look unstable. But now Emily's gone and I can't. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. A photo of Emily, sleeping in what looked like a car seat. Below it, 2 words, choose wisely. Mrs. Harrison, Detective Morris said, we need to move quickly. But if we pursue these charges, your mother-in-law could retaliate with her own accusations. given the email to your board. She's counting on that, I said, the pieces finally clicking into place. She thinks I'll back down to save my career. That I'll let them write me off as the unstable, greedy wife who tried to destroy the family. Sarah touched my arm. Ruby, the board meeting can wait. I stood up, gathering the documents. Detective, I want to file those charges. All of them. And I want a restraining order against Linda Harrison. Ruby, please, Melanie begged. If you do this. If I don't, Emily grows up thinking this is normal. That it's okay for family to manipulate and destroy each other. I turned to her. You can help us find her, or you can leave. Choose wisely. Melanie's face crumpled. She pulled out her phone, hands trembling. Mom has a lake house. It's not in her name, it's under a shell company. Emily and I spent last summer there. Detective Morris was already moving, coordinating with other officers. I watched them spring into action, feeling strangely calm. The career I'd built, my reputation, my future, all of it hung by a thread. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I knew exactly what I was fighting for. My phone buzzed one last time. Jake, whatever you're planning, don't. You'll lose everything. I typed back 3 words. I already have. Then I blocked his number and turned to Detective Morris. What do you need me to do? The detective smiled grimly. Tell me everything. From the beginning. So I did. Because some things were worth losing everything for. And some battles needed to be fought, no matter the cost. Behind me, Melanie sank into a chair, her face in her hands. Ahead, the detectives' team mobilized to find Emily. And somewhere between justice and revenge, I finally found my line in the sand. Linda wanted a war. She was about to get one. The lake house loomed before us, dark and silent in the pre-dawn light. Detective Morris's team moved into position while I sat in the unmarked car, my heart hammering against my ribs. Melanie fidgeted beside me, her fingers twisting a tissue into shreds. Mom always comes here when she's upset, she whispered. Ever since Dad. Since what? Since he tried to leave her. She made sure he lost everything first. A crackle of static from the police radio made us both jump. Movement inside. East window. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, watching shadows shift behind curtains. Somewhere in there was Emily, caught in Linda's web of control and manipulation, just like her mother had been, just like Jake. The radio crackled again. Subject is moving toward the back door with the child. Now, Morris ordered. Everything exploded into motion. Officers emerged from the shadows, converging on the house. But before they reached the door, Linda stepped onto the back deck. Emily clutched against her chest. Stay back, she called out, her voice carrying across the yard. I'm not letting you take her. I reached for the car door, but Morris's hand shot out. Wait, Ruby. Linda spotted me in the car. Come out here. Face me yourself instead of hiding behind the police. Melanie grabbed my arm. Don't. You don't know what she's capable of. I know exactly what she's capable of. I shook off her grip and stepped out of the car. Linda's laugh carried across the space between us. Finally showing some backbone? Too late, dear. The board's already seen the evidence against you. Your career is over. Jake's filing criminal charges. You've lost everything. Emily, I called out, ignoring Linda. Are you okay, sweetheart? The little girl nodded, her eyes wide with fear. She's fine, Linda snapped. Better than she'd be with a thief for an aunt. Did you really think I wouldn't have proof of your embezzlement? That I wouldn't protect my family from you? I took another step forward. Like you protected them from your husband? Linda's face went white. Behind me, Melanie made a choked sound. Melanie told me everything, Linda. About the lake house. About what you did to her father. How many others have you destroyed to maintain control? You don't know anything, Linda hissed, but her grip on Emily loosened slightly. I kept walking, each step measured, deliberate. I know about the offshore accounts. The shell companies. The pattern of destruction that follows anyone who challenges you. I have proof of all of it. You're bluffing. Am I? Check your phone. She shifted Emily to one arm, pulling out her phone. I watched her face change as she saw the email I'd sent minutes ago. Documents, bank records, testimonies from her past victims. All copied to the board, the police, and every major news outlet in the city. You wouldn't, she whispered. You taught me well, Linda. Sometimes you have to burn everything down to build something new. Emily suddenly twisted free, running toward me. I caught her as Linda lunged forward, but the police were already moving. In seconds, they had her surrounded. You'll regret this, Linda snarled as they led her away. All of you will. I held Emily close, feeling her trembling. Melanie approached slowly, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have stopped her years ago. Mom. Emily's small voice cut through the chaos. Are we safe now? I looked at the lake house, at Linda being placed in a police car, at the life I'd just burned to the ground. The sky was lightening, dawn breaking over the water. Yes, I said, and for the first time in years, I believed it. We're safe. My phone buzzed. Jake, probably learning what had happened. I declined the call. Whatever came next, whatever price I had to pay, some things were worth losing everything for. The sun rose over the lake, painting the world in shades of gold and promise. The boardroom felt like a tomb, 15 faces staring down at me from the elevated platform. My presentation materials, proof of Linda's schemes, Jake's fraud, the years of manipulation, sat untouched before them. Chairman Roberts hadn't even opened the folder. Mrs. Harrison, he said, these allegations against your mother-in-law are troubling. They're not allegations. They're facts. Facts that conveniently emerged after suspicious transfers were detected from company accounts under your supervision. The projector hummed to life, displaying transaction records. My stomach dropped as I recognized the pattern, perfectly crafted forgeries showing years of systematic theft. Linda's work, wearing my digital fingerprints. I can explain. Mrs. Harrison, Roberts cut in, given the severity of these discoveries and your recent emotional instability, the board has decided to suspend you pending investigation. Security waited by the door. My access badge would be deactivated before I reached the lobby. 15 years of climbing the corporate ladder, destroyed in 15 minutes. My phone vibrated. Jake's lawyer. Criminal charges filed. Court date set. Recommend immediate settlement. I walked out with my head high, past Sarah's tearful face, past the whispers and stares. In the elevator, another message pinged. Melanie. They're releasing Mom on bail. Emily's scared. Please help. The doors opened to reveal Jake waiting in the lobby, looking haunted. Ruby, we need to talk. Now you want to talk? After filing criminal charges. I didn't. Mom's lawyer filed them. I tried to stop it, but you're still too weak to stand up to her. I moved past him, but he caught my arm. She's destroying everything, he whispered. The business loans, the fraud charges, she set us both up. I found proof, but she threatened Emily if I came forward. I jerked away. Convenient timing, Jake. Where was this revelation when she was pouring tea over my head? Ruby, please. I know I messed up, but Emily, don't. My voice cracked. Don't use that child as a shield for your cowardice. Outside, reporters waited. Linda's email to the media had done its work. The successful executive's spectacular fall from grace, complete with accusations of theft and family betrayal. Cameras flashed as I pushed through them. My phone buzzed again. Detective Morris, evidence compromised. Internal Affairs investigation launched. Can't help further. Of course. Linda's influence reached far. I made it to my car before the tears came. Everything I'd built, everything I'd fought for gone. Linda had outmaneuvered me at every turn, using my own weapons against me. Even my attempt to expose her had played into her hands. A tap on my window made me jump. Emily stood there, tears streaming down her face. Behind her, Melanie hovered uncertainly. Grandma's coming home, Emily sobbed as I opened the door. She says we're all going to live together now. Be a proper family. She says you're sick and need help. Melanie called. We should go. No. Emily clung to me. Aunt Ruby's not sick. Grandma's the one who hurts people. I saw the papers, the ones she made Uncle Jake sign. I heard her on the phone about the fake money stuff. Melanie went pale. Emily, what papers? In Grandma's special room. The one we're not supposed to talk about. I looked at Melanie, seeing the same realization dawn in her eyes. Linda's perfect plan had one flaw. She'd forgotten about the one person she thought didn't matter. The child who saw everything. Emily, I said carefully, would you be brave enough to tell Detective Morris about those papers? She nodded, squeezing my hand. My phone buzzed one last time. Linda, it's over, Ruby. You've lost. I looked at Emily's determined face, at Melanie's dawning courage, at the truth finally emerging from the shadows. Maybe I had lost everything. But sometimes, losing everything was just the beginning. No, Linda, I whispered. It's just starting. Linda's special room looked exactly as Emily had described, a pristine home office with walls of filing cabinets. Detective Morris and his team moved methodically through the space while Linda sat rigid in her chair, her perfect posture finally cracking. This is harassment, she spat. You have no right. Actually, Morris held up the warrant. We do. Emily's testimony was quite specific about which cabinet contained the forged documents. I leaned against the doorframe, watching Linda's face. The same face that had smiled while dumping tea on me, now twisted with barely contained rage. You're using a child, she hissed at me. My own granddaughter. No, Linda. You used her. Just like you used Jake, Melanie, and everyone else. The detective's voice cut through our tension. Found it. Linda lunged for the drawer, but two officers held her back. Morris pulled out a thick folder. Original loan documents, banking records, emails outlining her entire scheme. Everything Emily had described. It's over, Mom. Jake stood in the doorway, Melanie beside him. Both looked shell-shocked as Morris read out document after document. You ungrateful children, Linda's voice trembled. Everything I did was for this family. To keep us together. To make us strong. You made us weak. Melanie stepped forward. You made us afraid. Of you, a failure of everything. Afraid. Linda laughed, high and brittle. I made you successful. Ask your father how well he did after he left. Ask anyone who's crossed me. Ask Emily. I cut in. What were you teaching her, Linda? That love means control? That family means fear. She turned on me, mask finally shattering. You were nothing before this family. A nobody from nowhere who thought she could take my son, my legacy. Your legacy? Jake's voice cracked. Look around, Mom. Look what you've built. Lies. Fraud. Your own granddaughter testified against you because she was more afraid of your love than your anger. Speaking of testimony, Morris interrupted. Mrs. Harrison, we found evidence of extensive financial fraud, identity theft, and criminal conspiracy. You'll need to come with us. Linda's eyes darted around the room, finding no allies. You can't prove. Actually, I pulled out my phone. We can. Emily wasn't the only one gathering evidence. Remember that charity foundation you used to launder money? Their board just voted to cooperate with the investigation. Fully. The color drained from her face. You learned from the best. I stepped closer. You taught me well, Linda. About power. About consequences. About family. She lunged at me suddenly, years of careful control exploding into rage. But before the officers could react, Melanie caught her mother's arm. Stop. Melanie's voice was quiet but firm. Just stop. Linda stared at her daughter's hand, then at Jake's resolute face, then finally at me. Something crumbled behind her eyes. You've destroyed everything, she whispered. No, I replied. You did that yourself. I just showed them the truth. As the officers led her away, Jake touched my arm. Ruby, don't. I stepped back. This isn't forgiveness, Jake. This is justice. There's a difference. What happens now? Melanie asked, staring at the empty doorway where her mother had disappeared. Emily's voice answered from the hallway. We get better. We all turned. She stood there, small but straight-backed, looking so much stronger than any of us. We get better, she repeated. Right, Aunt Ruby? I looked at this broken family. Jake's shame, Melanie's grief, Emily's hope. The revenge I'd wanted had transformed into something else. Something that felt less like victory and more like liberation. Yes, I said, taking Emily's hand. We get better. Behind us, Linda's perfect room lay in ruins, her careful facade stripped away. But in that destruction, I saw something new emerging. Something real. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about destroying the lies they built their power on. And sometimes that's enough. The courtroom emptied slowly, murmurs echoing off marble walls as Linda was led away in handcuffs. I remained seated, watching Emily draw patterns on the wooden bench with her finger. 7 to 10 years, she said thoughtfully. That's like forever. Not forever, I replied. Just long enough. Melanie approached, clutching her purse like a shield. The house sold. Above asking price. She handed me an envelope. Your share of the proceeds. I know it doesn't make up for. Keep it, I said. Put it in Emily's college fund. The ghost of a smile crossed her face. You're still looking out for us, even after everything. Not for us, Emily corrected. For me. Because I told the truth. Jake lingered by the courtroom doors, uncertain. He'd testified against his mother, finally finding his voice after years of silence. Too late for us, but maybe not too late for himself. My phone buzzed, a message from the board. After Linda's conviction, they launched an internal investigation that cleared my name. They wanted me back, with a promotion and a public apology. I deleted the message without responding. You're not going back, are you? Emily asked, watching my face. No. Some places you can't go back to. Sometimes you have to build something new. Like my art studio. She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. A business plan written in crayon, complete with stick figure drawings. Mom says I'm too young, but I've been saving my allowance. Melanie sighed. Emily. Actually, I interrupted. I'd like to hear this pitch. Emily's face lit up. She launched into her presentation, describing her vision for an after-school art program for kids. No pressure, no competition, just creation. A safe space to express themselves. And see. She pointed to a wobbly organizational chart. You could help run it, Aunt Ruby. You're good at business stuff and Mom's good at art, and we could. She stopped, uncertain. Unless you don't want to be around us anymore. The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. I looked at Melanie's hopeful expression, at Jake's distant guilt, at Emily's simple wisdom. You know what Linda never understood? I said finally. The difference between controlling people and supporting them. Between fear and love. Emily nodded solemnly. Like how she said she was protecting us, but really she was just scared of losing us? Exactly. I picked up her business plan. So maybe it's time to build something different. Something real. Is that a yes? Her eyes sparkled. It's a let's talk about it. Over ice cream. Can Mom come? I met Melanie's gaze. If she wants to. Jake stepped forward. Ruby, not you, Jake. I kept my voice gentle but firm. Some bridges stay burned. But I hope you build better ones. He nodded, understanding finally settling into his features. As he left, Emily slipped her hand into mine. Grandma said revenge would make you ugly inside, she whispered. But it didn't. It made you stronger. Made all of us stronger. I thought about Linda's face as the verdict was read, about the years of manipulation unraveled by a child's truth, about the difference between revenge and justice, between destruction and transformation. Ready to go? I asked. Emily nodded, then paused. Can we get chocolate ice cream? Any flavor you want. As we left the courthouse, I felt the weight of the past 8 years lifting. Linda's perfect family had shattered, but from its ruins, something authentic was emerging. Not perfect, not unmarked, but real. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. Sometimes it's about getting free. And sometimes, freedom tastes like chocolate ice cream on a Tuesday afternoon, planning a future that nobody else gets to control.
The text appeared on my phone like a digital slap across the face. I need to tell you something. Don't wait up tonight. 7 words. That's all it took to make my hand shake, my coffee mug clattering against the kitchen counter. I've been married to Tyler long enough to know when something's wrong. 8 years of sharing a life teaches you to read between the lines, to sense the tremors before the earthquake hits. I stared at those words until they blurred, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. What do you say to a message that reeks of goodbye? Is everything okay? I typed, deleted, typed again. Pathetic. Of course nothing was okay. The house felt different suddenly. Too quiet. Too empty. Our wedding photos on the wall seemed to mock me. Tyler's perfect smile, his arm around my waist, both of us radiating happiness. What a joke. My phone buzzed again. Margaret knows. She'll explain everything. Margaret. Of course his mother would be involved. She'd never approved of me, always finding subtle ways to remind me that I wasn't good enough for her precious son. Too focused on my writing, not ready for children, not from the right social circle. I called Ben immediately. Something's wrong, I said when he picked up. Tyler's acting strange, and apparently Margaret has all the answers. Heaven! Ben's lawyer voice kicked in, calm and measured. Don't jump to conclusions. Want me to come over? No, I need to handle this myself. The doorbell rang, making me flinch. Through the frosted glass, I could see Margaret's silhouette, straight-backed and proper as always. I opened the door, noting her perfectly pressed clothes, her immaculate makeup. She looked like she was attending a business meeting, not destroying someone's life. Heaven, dear! Her smile didn't reach her eyes. May I come in? I stepped aside, watching her glide into my living room like she owned it. She probably thought she did. I assume Tyler has messaged you? She perched on the edge of our sofa, her designer handbag placed precisely beside her. Cut the act, Margaret. What's going on? She sighed, a sound full of practiced sympathy. Tyler's found someone else. Someone more suitable. Her name is Clara. I introduced them at the charity gala last month. The words hit like bullets, each one finding its mark. Last month. The gala I couldn't attend because I was at my writing workshop, the one Margaret had insisted Tyler attend alone. You planned this. The realization came with crystal clarity. I merely facilitated an inevitable outcome. Margaret's voice turned steel cold. Let's be honest, Heaven. You were never going to give Tyler what he needs, what our family needs. Clara understands the importance of legacy. I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised us both. Legacy? You mean she's young and fertile, unlike your broken daughter-in-law? Don't be crude. Margaret stood, smoothing her skirt. Tyler will be filing for divorce. I suggest you make this easy on everyone and accept it gracefully. Gracefully? My voice shook. Like you gracefully orchestrated my husband's affair? Oh, Heaven. She reached for her bag, looking almost pitying. Did you really think this marriage would last? You were never one of us. Tyler needs someone who can give him children, who understands our world. Clara is perfect for him. I watched her walk to the door, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors we'd picked out together. Tyler and I, planning for a future that was now turning to ash. Margaret? I called after her. She paused, hand on the doorknob. Tell Tyler something for me? She turned, eyebrow raised. Tell him I hope Clara gives him everything he wants. I smiled, feeling something hard and cold settle in my chest. And tell him I'll see him in court. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving me alone in a house full of memories that suddenly felt like lies. My phone buzzed again. Tyler, probably with more excuses, more explanations. I didn't read it. Instead, I opened my laptop and started typing. Not another chapter of my novel, but something else entirely. Something that would make them all pay. Tyler came home at midnight, reeking of expensive perfume and guilt. I sat in the dark living room, my laptop still open to the document that would destroy him. He flipped on the lights and jumped. Jesus, Heaven, what are you doing sitting in the dark? Waiting for my husband to come home and tell me about Clara. The name felt like poison on my tongue. Or were you planning to let your mother do all your dirty work? He loosened his tie, a nervous gesture I'd once found endearing. So she told you. She did more than tell me. She gloated. I closed my laptop with a snap. How long have you been planning this? It's not what you think. Tyler paced the room, keeping his distance. Clara and I... It just happened. We connected. At the gala, your mother insisted I skip? My laugh sounded hollow. The one she practically pushed you to attend? He had the decency to look uncomfortable. Mother had nothing to do with... Stop lying. I stood up, my legs steadier than I expected. She orchestrated the whole thing, found the perfect breeding mare for her precious son. Don't be crude. His words echoed his mother's, making my skin crawl. This isn't about having children. No? I moved closer, watching him retreat. Then why did your mother spend 20 minutes explaining how Clara understands the importance of family legacy? Tyler's face hardened. Maybe she has a point. We've been trying for years, Heaven. Years of disappointment, of watching you pour yourself into your writing instead of what? My voice rose. Instead of being the perfect society wife? Instead of attending your mother's charity functions and playing hostess to her friends? That's not fair. Fair? I grabbed my phone, pulling up the photos I'd found earlier. Was it fair when you and Clara spent Valentine's Day together while I was at my fertility appointment? Was it fair when your mother introduced her to your entire family at Easter, knowing what you were planning? His eyes widened at the photos. You've been spying on me? No, Tyler. Your mother's friends aren't as discreet as she thinks. They've been sending me sympathetic messages all day, complete with evidence of your indiscretions. He sank onto the couch, head in his hands. I never meant to hurt you. That's the problem, isn't it? I moved toward the stairs. You never meant anything. You just let your mother puppet master our entire marriage. Where are you going? To pack. I paused on the first step. Unless you'd prefer to leave? After all, Clara's probably waiting up for you. Heaven, please. We can talk about this. Like you talked to me before starting an affair? Or like you talked to me before letting your mother plan my replacement? His silence was answer enough. I climbed the stairs, each step feeling like a victory. Behind me, I heard him on the phone. Mother? She knows everything. No, I don't think she'll be reasonable about this. In our bedroom, my bedroom now, I opened my laptop again. The document was still there, waiting. I'd titled it, The Perfect Son, a story about a wealthy family's golden boy and his controlling mother. Fiction, of course, with just enough truth to make them squirm. My phone buzzed with a text from Ben. How are you holding up? I typed back. Starting chapter 2, it's going to be a bestseller. Below, I could hear Tyler still talking to Margaret, their voices rising. Let them plot. Let them scheme. They thought they were breaking me, but they were just giving me material. Another text came through, this time from an unknown number. Heaven, this is Clara. We need to talk. I stared at the message, a smile spreading across my face. Perfect. Every story needs an unexpected ally, and Clara might just be mine. After all, she'd seen Margaret's manipulation up close. Maybe it was time she learned what happened to Margaret's last daughter-in-law. I saved my document and started a new message to Clara. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold, it's published in hardcover. I met Clara at a small cafe 3 blocks from my house, far enough from Tyler's usual haunts to avoid detection. She sat in a corner booth, perfectly put together in that effortless way that probably took hours to achieve. Just Margaret's type. Thank you for meeting me, she said, fingers wrapped around an untouched latte. I know this must be difficult. Difficult? I slid into the booth. That's one word for it. Betrayal might be another. Clara flinched. I didn't know about you at first. Margaret told me Tyler was separated, going through a divorce. Of course she did. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the Easter photos. Is that why you're wearing my grandmother's sapphire necklace here? Her hand flew to her throat, though the necklace was long gone. Margaret gave it to me, said it was a family heirloom. Ah, it was. My grandmother gave it to me on my wedding day. I zoomed in on the image. Notice how Margaret's smiling? That's her victory face. Heaven, Save it. I set my phone down. You didn't ask me here to apologize. Clara reached into her designer bag, pulling out a stack of letters. No, I didn't. I asked you here because you need to see these. The letters were expensive stationery, Margaret's flowing script unmistakable. I started reading, each word making my stomach turn. Plans, carefully laid out over months. Instructions for Clara on how to dress, what to say, when to laugh at Tyler's jokes. Details about his schedule, his preferences, his weaknesses. She's been grooming me, Clara's voice cracked. Like some kind of replacement part. That's Margaret's specialty, I kept reading. She did the same thing with Tyler's first wife. Clara's head snapped up. First wife? Sarah. I met her eyes. Lasted 11 months before she had a convenient mental breakdown. Margaret had her committed. The divorce was quick, quiet, and very generous, provided Sarah never contacted Tyler again. Oh, God. Clara's latte was definitely cold now. There's more. Margaret. She has expectations. About children. About my role in the family business. Let me guess. She's already planned the nursery? And the prep schools. The college applications. The whole future mapped out before I'm even pregnant. Clara's perfectly manicured nails dug into her palms. I thought I was in control, playing the game. But she's been playing me all along. I gathered the letters, scanning the dates. These go back 8 months, well before the gala. She approached me at a charity auction, said her son needed someone suitable. Clara laughed bitterly. I thought she meant socially. I didn't realize she was casting for a specific role. My phone buzzed. Tyler calling again. I declined it, watching another text pop up. Where are you? Mother's worried. Does Tyler know? I asked Clara. About the letters? Tyler only knows what Margaret tells him. She pulled out one more envelope. This arrived yesterday, my script for the next 6 months, including when to announce the pregnancy. But you're not. No. Clara's smile was sharp. And I won't be. That's why I needed to see you. I'm done being Margaret's puppet, but I need help making sure I don't end up like Sarah. I studied her face, looking for deception. Why should I trust you? Because I have something Margaret wants to keep hidden. Clara tapped the envelope. Something that could ruin more than just her perfect family image. My phone buzzed again. Ben this time. Margaret's looking for you. Be careful. I gathered the letters, mind racing. Clara could be lying, setting another trap, but the fear in her eyes seemed real enough. And if she had proof of Margaret's schemes, meet me tomorrow, I said, standing. Bring whatever evidence you have. And Clara, if you're playing me, remember, I'm not Sarah. I don't break easily. She nodded, understanding the threat. Tomorrow then. And heaven? I really am sorry. I left her there, letters tucked safely in my bag. Outside, the spring air felt electric with possibility. Margaret had made one crucial mistake. She'd chosen a replacement who was just as ambitious as she was. And now that replacement was ready to switch sides. My phone buzzed one more time, Margaret herself. We need to discuss your behavior, dear. Come to dinner tonight. I smiled, typing back. Of course, Mother. I have so much to share. Margaret's dining room felt like a stage set. Crystal glasses catching the chandelier light, silver gleaming on starched linen. Everything arranged just so, a perfect tableau of family power. Tyler sat at his usual place, Clara beside him, both looking anywhere but at me. Heaven, darling! Margaret gestured to my old seat. I'm so glad you could join us. I remained standing, Clara's letters burning a hole in my bag. Interesting seating arrangement. Well, Margaret's smile tightened. We need to discuss the new dynamics. The dynamics where you orchestrated my replacement? I pulled out one of Clara's letters. Or the dynamics where you plan to announce her pregnancy next month? Tyler's head snapped up. What pregnancy? The one your mother scheduled, Clara said quietly. Along with the birth announcement, the christening, and probably the child's first word. Margaret's knife clattered against fine china. Clara, dear, you're obviously confused. Show him the letters, I told Clara. Show him how his mother picked out his new wife like she was casting a play. Clara reached for her bag, but Margaret cut in. That's quite enough. Heaven, you're clearly upset, but this theatrical display... Theatrical? I laughed. Like the performance you arranged at the gala? Or maybe like Sarah's convenient breakdown? The room went silent. Tyler's face drained of color. How do you know about Sarah? I did some digging. I met Margaret's steel gaze. Found some interesting court records. Seems your mother has a pattern. Mother? Tyler turned to Margaret. What is she talking about? Margaret dabbed her lips with a napkin. Ancient history. Your first marriage was a youthful mistake. That you corrected, I cut in, with a carefully planned replacement. Just like now. Clara stood suddenly, chair scraping against hardwood. I can't do this anymore. She pulled out her own stack of letters. Tyler, you need to read these. All of them. Margaret rose, authority crackling around her like static. Clara, remember our discussion about your future in this family. My future? Clara's laugh held an edge of hysteria. You mean the one you've scripted down to the minute? The one where I'm just another prop in your perfect family portrait? Tyler grabbed the letters, starting to read. With each page, his hands shook more violently. You planned all of this? He looked at his mother. The gala, the chance meetings, everything? I did what was necessary, Margaret said. Heaven couldn't give you children. Clara can. It's that simple. Simple? I moved closer to Margaret. Like it was simple to have Sarah committed? To convince Tyler she was unstable? Sarah was unstable, Margaret snapped. Just like you're being unstable now. No, Clara interrupted. She's being honest. Something this family should try sometime. Tyler stood, letters crushed in his fist. I need some air. Tyler, wait! Margaret reached for him, but he jerked away. Don't! He looked at each of us in turn. Just don't! The front door slammed behind him, leaving silence in its wake. Well, Margaret smoothed her skirt, composure cracking slightly. I hope you're all satisfied with tonight's drama. Drama? I pulled out my phone, showing her the screen. This isn't drama, Margaret. This is evidence. Every letter, every manipulation, every scheme, all documented. Ready to share with the family lawyers, the society papers, everyone. You wouldn't dare. Try me. I gathered my things. Oh, and Clara, Ben's waiting outside if you need a ride. He's quite good at handling delicate legal situations. Clara nodded, collecting her bag. Thank you. Margaret watched us head for the door, her perfect world crumbling around her. Heaven, she called after me. What do you want? I turned back, seeing fear in her eyes for the first time. Want? I want you to remember this moment, Margaret. The moment you realized you don't control everything. The moment your perfect plan fell apart. Outside, Ben's car idled in the driveway. Clara hesitated before getting in. Are you sure about this? She asked. I looked back at Margaret's house, at the shadows moving behind curtained windows. No, but I'm sure about one thing. We're done being pawns in her game. Ben's office felt like a war room, papers spread across his desk, photos and timelines pinned to a corkboard. Clara sat beside me, her designer outfit wrinkled from hours of planning. Sarah's medical records lay open between us, a stark reminder of what Margaret was capable of. She'll come after you both, Ben said, tapping Sarah's file. She's already laying the groundwork. 3 calls today about Heaven's unstable behavior at dinner. Of course she is. I traced the signature on Sarah's commitment papers. History repeating itself. Clara's phone buzzed. Tyler again. She silenced it without looking. He's been texting all night. Wants to meet, to explain. Don't! Ben's voice hardened. Not without witnesses. Margaret's too smart to leave loose ends. A knock at the door made us all jump. Ben's assistant entered, looking worried. Ms. Rivers, there's someone here to see you. Says she's Sarah Mitchell. The room went silent. Clara's face paled. Sarah's here? Send her in, I said before Ben could object. Sarah wasn't what I expected. No broken woman, no tragic victim. She walked in like someone who'd rebuilt herself from scratch, elegant and sharp-edged. So? She surveyed our evidence wall. Margaret's at it again. You knew? Clara asked. I suspected, when I saw the engagement announcement. Sarah picked up her own medical file. Let me guess. She's already started the whisper campaign? Little comments about emotional stability, about handling stress? I nodded, watching her carefully. Why are you here? Because Tyler called me. She sat down, crossing her legs. First time in 7 years. He's finally asking questions about what really happened. And what did happen? Clara leaned forward. Margaret happened. She orchestrated everything. The doctors, the diagnosis, the treatment. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. The papers were signed, the story was set. Ben grabbed a legal pad. Would you testify to that? No. Sarah's smile was razor sharp. I'll do better. I'll give you Margaret's playbook. Every move, every manipulation, documented in detail, including what she's planning next. My manuscript page glowed on my laptop screen, waiting. How do you know what she's planning? Because I've spent 7 years studying her, tracking her patterns, and because she just tried to contact me, offering a very generous payment to confirm your instability. Clara's phone buzzed again. Margaret this time. The text preview made her gasp. Darling, let's discuss your future. Tyler's not the only son with prospects. She's trying to trade me to Tyler's brother, Clara whispered. Like I'm some sort of investment. That's exactly what you are to her. Sarah stood, smoothing her skirt. What we all were. Pieces in her perfect family puzzle. So help us stop her, I said. Better. Sarah pulled out a USB drive. Help me destroy her. Everything's here. Financial records, medical conspiracies, 7 years of evidence. Margaret's not just manipulative, she's criminal. And it's time everyone knew. Ben took the drive, lawyer mode engaged. This could get ugly. It's already ugly, I said, thinking of my manuscript, of the story taking shape. But now we have something Margaret doesn't. What's that? Clara asked. The truth, all of it, and a platform to tell it. I opened my laptop, creating a new folder. The Margaret Chronicles. Sarah watched me type, understanding dawning. A book? Better. A series of exposés, released piece by piece. Let her try to discredit all of us at once. Ben's phone chimed. A message from Tyler. We need to talk, about Mother, about everything. Careful, Sarah warned. Tyler's not as innocent as he seems. No, I agreed, thinking of all the times he must have known, must have seen, must have chosen to ignore. But he's about to learn something important. What's that? Clara asked. I looked at our wall of evidence, at Sarah's strength, at Clara's determination, at my own reflection in the window, no longer broken, but sharp enough to cut. That his mother isn't the only one who knows how to orchestrate a perfect ending. The annual Rivers Family Gala buzzed with whispers and sideways glances. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, watching Margaret hold court near the champagne fountain, Tyler hovering uncertainly at her side. No Clara in sight, smart girl. Are you sure about this? Ben murmured, appearing at my elbow with a USB drive. Once we start, there's no going back. I took the drive, feeling its weight like a loaded gun. Sarah's in position? Ready with the slideshow, just waiting for your signal. Margaret caught my eye across the room, her smile razor sharp. She raised her glass in mock toast, so confident in her control. She hadn't noticed the tech crew setting up the projector, hadn't seen Sarah slip in through the service entrance. Heaven! Tyler's voice behind me. We need to talk. No, I turned to face him. We need to listen. Everyone needs to listen. The lights dimmed, right on cue. Margaret's voice carried across the suddenly quiet room. Heaven, darling, what are you? The first image hit the wall. Margaret's handwritten instructions to Clara, complete with a schedule for the affair. Then, Sarah's medical records, the falsified diagnoses, financial documents showing payments to doctors, to lawyers, to silence anyone who threatened her perfect family facade. What is this? Tyler grabbed my arm. Stop it, now! Why? I jerked away. Afraid everyone will see who you really are? Who she made you? Margaret moved toward the projector, but Sarah stepped out, blocking her path. Hello, Margaret. Remember me? The room erupted in gasps as Sarah's commitment papers appeared on screen, Margaret's signature stark against white paper. "This is slander," Margaret announced, but her voice shook. "These documents are clearly fabricated. Like you fabricated my mental illness?" Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. "Like you fabricated Heaven's instability? Clara's sudden appearance in Tyler's life?" "Tyler," Margaret turned to her son, "handle this." But Tyler stood frozen, watching years of manipulation unspool in high definition. His mother's letters, his father's silence, his own willing blindness, all exposed. Then came the audio. Margaret's voice, crystal clear. "Clara, dear, once we handle Heaven like we handled Sarah, everything will fall into place. Tyler always does what's best for the family." The room went dead silent. I felt Tyler's stare like a physical weight. "You recorded her?" he whispered. "No." Clara's voice rang out as she emerged from the crowd. "I did. Every meeting, every instruction, every threat." Margaret's composure cracked. "You ungrateful little—" "What?" Clara moved to stand beside me. "Ungrateful for being groomed as a replacement? For being traded between your sons like a stock option? I gave you everything." "You gave me a script," Clara spat. "Just like you gave Tyler a script. Just like you gave everyone a script." The projector clicked to the final image. Margaret's letter to Sarah's doctors, detailing exactly how to break someone without leaving evidence. "Enough!" Tyler's voice sounded strange, hollow. "Mother, what did you do?" Margaret straightened, ice replacing panic. "What I had to do, for this family, for you." "For me?" Tyler laughed, an ugly sound. "You destroyed lives for me?" "I built lives," Margaret snapped. "I created perfection. Everything I did was a lie." I stepped forward, facing her directly. "Every moment, every relationship, every perfect family photo, all lies." The room spun with shocked faces, whispered conversations, phones recording everything. Margaret's carefully constructed world crumbling in real time. Then she smiled, that same calculating smile I'd seen so many times before. "You think this changes anything? You think anyone will believe the ravings of 2 discarded wives and an ambitious little climber?" "No," I said quietly, "but they'll believe this." I held up my phone, showing her the manuscript title, The Margaret Chronicles, a true story of power, manipulation, and justice. "The first chapter goes live tonight," Sarah added. "Every major publisher's already bidding." Margaret's face went white. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. And in that moment, watching her perfect world shatter, I felt nothing but emptiness. This wasn't victory. This wasn't even revenge. This was just truth, finally breaking free. The aftermath of the gala exploded across social media, Margaret's carefully crafted empire crumbling in real time. I sat in Ben's office, watching the views on my manuscript excerpt climb into the millions, when Tyler walked in unannounced. "She's in the hospital," he said, looking haunted. "Mother had a breakdown after the gala." "Real or staged?" Sarah's voice cut through the room as she emerged from Ben's private office. "Because we've seen this performance before." Tyler flinched. "Sarah, Save it." She tossed a folder onto Ben's desk. "Your mother's already trying to spin this. Called 3 journalists claiming Heaven, and I conspired to destroy her family out of jealousy." "Of course she did." Clara appeared in the doorway, her designer outfit replaced by jeans and a simple blouse. "She just called me, offering to double my trust fund if I publicly discredit Heaven." Tyler sank into a chair. "This has to stop." "It will," I said, opening my laptop. "When the truth comes out. All of it." "The truth?" He laughed bitterly. "Which version? The one where my mother orchestrated everything? Or the one where I let her?" The room went silent. Clara's breath caught. Sarah leaned forward. "Say that again," Ben said quietly, recording app open. "I knew." Tyler's voice cracked. "Not everything, not at first. But I knew what she did to Sarah. I knew she was pushing Clara into my life. I knew, and I did nothing." "Why?" The word felt like glass in my throat. "Because it was easier. Because she always fixed everything, made everything perfect. Because, because you're exactly like her. Margaret stood in the doorway, looking immaculate despite her supposed breakdown. You understand the importance of family, of legacy. Mother, don't. No, Tyler, it's time for truth, isn't it? She moved into the room like a queen entering court. You want confession? Here's mine. I did everything they accused me of, and more, because this family needed it, needed me. We have evidence, Ben warned. Real evidence. Of course you do, Margaret smiled. I made sure of it. The realization hit like ice water. You wanted to be exposed. Clever girl. Margaret sat down, perfectly poised. Do you know what happens to powerful families in scandal? They become legends, dynasties. The river's name will be immortal now. You're insane, Clara whispered. I'm practical. Heaven's book will be a bestseller. Tyler's redemption arc will captivate society. Even you, Clara, will profit from your role as the repentant other woman. She turned to Sarah. And you, my dear, will finally have your vindication. At what cost? Tyler stood, shaking. Our lives? Our choices? Choices? Margaret laughed. You never made choices, Tyler. You followed my script, just like your father, just like everyone. Not anymore. I closed my laptop. Your story ends here. Does it? She raised an eyebrow. Look around, Heaven. Everyone in this room is exactly where I planned, playing their parts perfectly. No, Sarah stepped forward. We're not characters in your story anymore. We're witnesses. To what? To this. I pulled out my phone, showing her the live stream. Thousands watching as she confessed, as she revealed her true self. Margaret's composure cracked just for a moment. You didn't follow your script? Clara moved to stand beside me. That's the thing about manipulation, Margaret. Eventually, people learn to write their own stories. Tyler, Margaret turned to her son, handle this. But Tyler was already walking away. Goodbye, Mother. You'll regret this, she called after him. All of you. No, I said quietly. We won't, because your story isn't ours anymore. It never was. Margaret stood, straightening her jacket. Well played, Heaven. But remember, every story needs a villain, and I'm very good at that role. She walked out, head high, leaving us in silence. Now what? Clara asked. I opened my laptop again, starting a new chapter. Now we tell our own stories, all of them. No scripts, no manipulation, just truth. The cursor blinked, waiting. Behind me, Sarah and Clara exchanged looks. Ben started making calls. And somewhere in the city, Margaret was already planning her next move. But this time, we were ready. This time, we were writing our own endings. The book launch party buzzed with energy, my story displayed in every bookstore window across the city. The Margaret Chronicles had become more than an exposé. It was a movement, inspiring others to break free from their own manipulated lives. I signed another copy, meeting the reader's eyes. To Sarah, she whispered. Not the Sarah from your book, but someone who needed this story. Behind her, Clara chatted with journalists, her own tell-all memoir already generating buzz. She caught my eye and nodded. No more scripts, no more perfect roles to play. Quite a turnout. Ben appeared at my elbow, champagne in hand. Margaret would be proud. Is that supposed to be funny? Actually, it's supposed to be ironic. He handed me an envelope. This came to the office today. Thought you should see it. Inside was a letter. Margaret's elegant handwriting unchanged despite everything. Dear Heaven, you were right. Every story needs a villain. But the best villains, like the best writers, understand their power. You've made me immortal, darling, and for that, I almost forgive you. Margaret. She never changes, does she? I crumpled the letter. Maybe that's not the point, a new voice said. I turned to find Lucas standing there, his daughter Emma clutching his hand. Maybe the point is that you did. I met his eyes, remembering our first meeting at a writing workshop months ago, before the story broke, before he showed me that family could be simple, honest, real. Emma has something for you, he said softly. The little girl held out a drawing, stick figures holding hands, a sun shining above them. It's us, she explained, for your new story. My new story? The happy one, she said, as if it were obvious. After the sad one ends. I took the drawing, feeling its weight in my hands. Through the window, I could see Tyler across the street, staring at the bookstore display. Our eyes met briefly before he turned away, disappearing into the crowd. Heaven! Sarah approached, her therapy practice now flourishing with women escaping their own Margarets. They're ready for the reading. I moved toward the podium, Lucas and Emma finding seats in the front row. The audience settled, waiting for more revelations, more drama, more pain. Instead, I opened to the epilogue. This isn't a story about revenge. It's not even a story about justice. It's a story about the words we use to write our own lives and the courage it takes to start a new page. Clara squeezed my hand as she passed. Ben raised his glass. Sarah smiled, finally free of old ghosts. A movement at the back caught my eye. Margaret, elegant as ever, slipping into the shadows. She'd come to witness her own immortality, just as she'd planned. But this wasn't her story anymore. It never really was. I looked down at Emma's drawing, then back at my audience. All these people writing their own stories, breaking their own chains. Once upon a time, I began, there was a woman who thought love meant control, and a family who forgot how to speak their own truth. The words flowed, not with anger or revenge, but with understanding. Because in the end, Margaret had given me something precious, the power to tell my own story, to choose my own family, to write my own ending. Emma beamed up at me, Lucas's hand resting protectively on her shoulder. This was my new story, messy, imperfect, real. No scripts, no manipulation, no perfect facades. Just truth, in all its complicated beauty. And somewhere in the shadows, Margaret watched her legacy transform into something she never intended, a testament not to control, but to freedom. Not to perfection, but to growth. Not to her story, but to ours. I turned the page, ready to begin again.
The sound of crystal glasses clinking together always reminded me of tiny bells at a funeral. Delicate, haunting, a sound that should be beautiful, but somehow isn't. Tonight, those chimes echoed through my mother-in-law Eleanor's dining room as she held court at yet another of her impromptu dinner parties. I'm Camille, and until tonight, I thought I had mastered the art of surviving in the Thompson family. Ryan, darling, Samantha was just telling me about her father's new development project. Eleanor's voice carried that particular lilt she reserved for her carefully orchestrated moments. Perhaps you two should discuss it over coffee sometime? My husband shifted in his chair beside me, his fork scraping against bone china. Sure, Mother, that could be interesting. I stabbed my roasted duck breast, watching the pink juice pool around the perfectly arranged vegetables. Eleanor had outdone herself tonight. 12 guests, all strategically placed around her mahogany table like pieces on a chessboard. And there, 3 seats down, sat Samantha, all pearls and precision-curled blonde hair, laughing at something my father-in-law Henry had mumbled. The timing couldn't be better, really, Eleanor continued, dabbing her lips with a monogrammed napkin, especially with Ryan entering this new chapter of his life. The duck turned to ash in my mouth. New chapter? Well, yes. Eleanor's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Changes are inevitable, aren't they? Nothing stays the same forever. Ryan's hand found my knee under the table, but it felt less like comfort and more like restraint. I watched him take a long sip of wine, avoiding my gaze. Speaking of changes, Samantha chimed in, her voice syrupy sweet. My father's always looking for talented architects for his projects. The right connections can make such a difference in one's career. The conversation flowed around me like poison honey, thick with implications. I caught Jessica Adams watching me from across the table, her eyes filled with that particular mix of pity and curiosity that made my skin crawl. "Excuse me," I said, pushing back my chair. "I need some air." The terrace offered temporary refuge. Behind me, laughter and conversation spilled through the French doors like smoke. I gripped the stone balustrade, counting breaths until I heard familiar footsteps. "Cam, you're overreacting." Ryan's voice carried that placating tone I'd grown to hate. "Mother's just being mother." I turned to face him. "Is she? Because it sounded an awful lot like she was shopping for your next wife." "Don't be ridiculous." He ran a hand through his hair. A tell I'd learned meant he was lying. "You're reading too much into things." "Am I? Then why haven't you looked me in the eye since she mentioned your new chapter?" The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Inside, Eleanor's laugh rang out, sharp and triumphant. "We should get back," Ryan said finally. "They'll wonder where we've gone." As he turned away, I caught my reflection in the window, composed, polished, the perfect corporate wife in my carefully chosen dress. But something had shifted tonight, like a fault line opening beneath my feet. "Ryan." My voice stopped him at the door. "When did you stop fighting for us?" He paused, hand on the doorknob. "There's nothing to fight about, Cam. Everything's fine." But as I watched him rejoin the party, sliding easily back into his seat beside Samantha, I knew nothing would ever be fine again. Eleanor had finally played her hand, and my husband, my Ryan, had already folded. I straightened my spine and walked back inside, the crystal glasses singing their funeral song. Eleanor wanted a war? Fine, but she'd soon learn that some daughters-in-law don't go quietly into that good night. They get even. 3 days after Eleanor's dinner party, I booked a weekend getaway at the coastal resort where Ryan and I had our honeymoon. The confirmation email sat in my inbox like a challenge, daring me to believe things could be fixed with ocean views and room service. "You're going where?" Ryan's voice crackled through my office phone. "Cam, I have that project deadline." The tide mark. I kept my voice steady, watching my computer screen blur. "Remember, where you promised we'd go back every year?" The silence on his end stretched until I could almost hear him calculating the cost of disappointing his mother versus disappointing me. Again. "Let me check my schedule," he said finally. "I'll call you back." He didn't, but Eleanor did. "Darling," she cooed when I answered. "Ryan mentioned your little trip idea. How wonderful. Henry and I were just saying we needed a break, and Samantha's father has that lovely beach house nearby. We could make it a proper family weekend." My fingers tightened around the phone. "Actually, Eleanor, I was hoping I've already made reservations for dinner Friday night. The chef there is simply magnificent, though not as magnificent as your cooking, of course." Her laugh tinkled like those damn crystal glasses. Ryan's so lucky to have a wife who understands the importance of family time. The trap snapped shut before I could dodge it. Say no, and I'm the selfish wife keeping Ryan from his family. Say yes, and watch my romantic getaway turn into another Eleanor production. That evening, I found Ryan in his home office, blueprints spread across his desk like battle plans. "Your mother called me today." He didn't look up. "She mentioned that." "Did she mention she invited herself along on our weekend?" "Cam, don't start." His pencil moved in precise lines across the paper. "You know how she gets about family activities." "This wasn't supposed to be a family activity." I moved closer, placing my hand over his drawing. "This was supposed to be about us." He finally met my eyes, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the man who once drove 8 hours just to bring me soup when I was sick at a conference. Then his phone buzzed, Eleanor's special ringtone, and the moment shattered. "I need to take this," he said, reaching for the phone. "Of course you do." I turned away, but not before catching the name on his blueprint. Adam's Development Project, Lead architect, Ryan Thompson. Jessica Adams' father's company. The same company Samantha had mentioned at dinner. The pieces clicked together with nauseating clarity. That weekend, I watched Eleanor orchestrate every moment like a symphony of subtle humiliation. She'd booked adjoining rooms, ensuring no private conversations. She'd arranged group activities that highlighted Samantha's youth and connections. Even the seating at dinner served her purpose. Ryan between her and Samantha, me relegated to the far end with Henry, who seemed more interested in his scotch than conversation. "Your mother's quite the strategist," I said to Ryan as we prepared for bed. He paused in loosening his tie. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just admiring how thoroughly she's planned everything, right down to making sure the Adams project landed on your desk." "That was my work, not her." "Was it?" I met his eyes in the mirror. "Like this weekend was my idea?" He turned, anger finally cracking his careful facade. "You're the one who wanted to come here. I wanted to come here with my husband. Instead, I got a front row seat to watching him slip away." The words hung between us like smoke. Outside, waves crashed against the shore, the same waves that had witnessed our honeymoon promises. Now they seemed to be counting down the moments until those promises broke completely. "I'm going for a walk," Ryan said, grabbing his jacket. I watched from our balcony as he headed toward the beach. A slim figure detached itself from the shadows of the hotel entrance, falling into step beside him. Samantha's laugh drifted up on the night air, and something inside me hardened into diamond. Enough playing defense. Time to change the game. The cafe where Eleanor held her weekly charity committee meetings looked like it had been decorated by someone who thought quaint meant suffocating. I sat at a corner table, hidden behind an oversized fern, watching my mother-in-law's performance through leaves that needed dusting. "Ladies, the hospital fundraiser simply must outshine last year's gala," Eleanor announced to her devoted audience. "We can't have people saying we've lost our touch." I wasn't supposed to be here, but neither was Samantha, who sat at Eleanor's right hand like a princess in waiting, occasionally touching Eleanor's arm when making a point. The gesture was practiced, perfect, just like the strand of pearls around her neck that matched Eleanor's exactly. My coffee had gone cold when I saw it. The small envelope Eleanor slipped to Samantha beneath a discussion of table arrangements. Samantha tucked it into her designer handbag without missing a beat in her suggestion about wine selections. The meeting dispersed with air kisses and promises of email updates. I waited until Eleanor left before following Samantha, who headed not toward her car, but down the block to the local bank. Inside, I kept my distance, pretending to fill out a deposit slip while watching her approach the safe deposit boxes. The bank employee's voice carried across the quiet space. "Of course, Miss Crawford. Box 247, just like always." Just like always. I left before she emerged, my mind racing. That night, I waited until Ryan was asleep before sliding his keys from his jacket pocket. His key ring included one I'd never seen him use. Small, brass, with numbers that matched a certain safe deposit box. The next morning, I called in sick to work and waited outside the bank. At precisely 10:15, Eleanor arrived for her own weekly visit. I counted to 100 before entering, Ryan's key burning in my pocket. The same employee who had helped Samantha greeted me with professional courtesy. "Mrs. Thompson, how lovely to see you. Your husband already accessed the box earlier this week, but you're certainly authorized." My smile felt stretched across my face. "Yes, Ryan mentioned I should check some documents." The box contained exactly what I expected: property deeds, investment papers, marriage certificates, and divorce papers, already drawn up, already bearing Ryan's signature in fresh ink. But there was something else. Letters, dozens of them, spanning months. Correspondence between Eleanor and Samantha's father. methodically planning their children's future. The Adams Development Project was just the beginning. They had mapped out Ryan's entire career, contingent on his marriage to Samantha. My hands shook as I took photos with my phone. Behind me, the bank's door chimed. Camille! I turned to find Samantha standing there, her perfect smile faltering. For a moment, we stared at each other like actors who had wandered into the wrong scene. I suppose Eleanor sent you to check on me? Her voice dripped fake concern. She mentioned you weren't feeling well today. No, she didn't. I closed the box with a decisive click. But I'm feeling much better now. Amazing what the truth can do for one's health. Her smile tightened. I don't know what you think you've found, but save it. I moved past her, then paused. Nice pearls, by the way. Eleanor has excellent taste in accessories and replacements. That evening, I sat at our dining room table, documents spread before me like tarot cards telling my future. The front door opened and closed. Ryan's footsteps paused in the doorway. You're home early, he said. Funny how finding divorce papers with your signature tends to clear one's schedule. The silence that followed told me everything his words couldn't. Cam, I can explain. Can you explain the letters too? The deals with Samantha's father? Or should I ask your mother about those? He stepped forward, reaching for me, but I held up my hand. Just don't. It's complicated, he whispered. Actually, it's very simple. I stood, gathering the documents. You chose your mother's vision of your future over our present. I just chose to stop pretending I didn't know. As I walked past him, he grabbed my arm. Where are you going? I looked at his hand, then into his eyes. To make some choices of my own. Linda's kitchen had always been my sanctuary, but tonight it felt like a confessional. The evidence I'd gathered from the safe deposit box lay scattered across her marble countertop while she poured us both generous glasses of wine. That manipulative witch, Linda muttered, examining the divorce papers. And Ryan actually signed these? I traced the rim of my glass. 2 days ago, according to the date. What are you going to do? The question hung between us like smoke. Through Linda's window, I could see Eleanor's annual charity gala in full swing at the country club across the street. Crystal chandeliers sparkled through floor-to-ceiling windows, while valets parked luxury cars in neat rows. I should be there tonight, I said. Eleanor made such a point of reminding me about my duties as a Thompson wife. Linda's eyes narrowed. You're plotting something. Maybe. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the photos I'd taken. Did you know Eleanor's been embezzling from her own charity? The letters weren't just about Ryan and Samantha. They detailed how Eleanor's been funneling donations through shell companies owned by Samantha's father. Linda nearly choked on her wine. Jesus, Cam, that's criminal? I smiled, but it felt more like baring teeth. Yes, it is. My phone buzzed. Ryan's fourth call tonight. I declined it, just as I had the others. Eleanor's not the only one with powerful friends, I continued. Remember Jessica Adams? Turns out she's been dying to step into Eleanor's role in the charity circuit. All she needs is the right opportunity. Cam. Linda's voice carried a warning. Be careful. Eleanor's dangerous when cornered. So am I. As if on cue, my phone lit up with a text from Jessica. You were right. Eleanor just announced Samantha as next year's charity chair. The board members are livid. I stood, smoothing my dress. I should make an appearance after all. Would hate to miss the fireworks. What fireworks? The ones that start when the board receives anonymous evidence of Eleanor's financial misconduct. Right about, I checked my watch. Now. Linda grabbed my arm. You'll burn every bridge. They're already burning. I'm just controlling the flames. The country club's entrance was chaos when I arrived. Board members huddled in angry clusters while Eleanor stood at the center, her perfect composure finally cracking. Samantha hovered nearby, her face pale beneath her makeup. Camille, Eleanor's voice cut through the murmurs when she spotted me. How dare you show your face here? I'm still a Thompson wife, I said sweetly. For now. Recognition flickered in her eyes. She knew I knew. Whatever you think you're doing, she hissed, you're only hurting yourself. No, Eleanor, I'm just following your example, protecting my interests. I turned to the gathering crowd. Though I suspect the charity board might have different interests to protect tonight. Ryan appeared suddenly, his face tight with anger and something else. Fear? Cam, we need to talk. Now. Like we talked about the divorce papers you signed? Or the deal you made with Samantha's father? The crowd fell silent. Eleanor's perfectly manicured nails dug into her clutch. You don't understand, Ryan started. I understand perfectly. I met Eleanor's gaze. I understand that power only works if people fear losing it. Isn't that right, Eleanor? She stepped forward, but Henry, quiet, passive Henry, suddenly appeared between us. Enough, Eleanor, he said softly. It's over. The police arrived 10 minutes later. I watched from Linda's kitchen window as they escorted Eleanor to a patrol car, her silk gown catching on the door as she ducked inside. Feel better? Linda asked, joining me at the window. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to earn Eleanor's approval, about Ryan's betrayal, about all the quiet humiliations I'd endured. No, I answered honestly, but I feel stronger. My phone buzzed again. Ryan. This time, I answered. We need to talk, he said. Yes, I agreed, watching the police car drive away. We do. The lease agreement for the old Italian restaurant sat unsigned on my desk, while Henry Thompson stood in my office doorway, looking more alive than I'd seen him in years. Eleanor doesn't know I'm here, he said, stepping inside and closing the door. But that building? It belonged to my grandmother. Eleanor's been trying to sell it for years. I studied the property photos spread across my desk. Prime location, historic charm, everything I needed for the restaurant I'd dreamed about since culinary school. Why are you showing me this? Because, Henry's voice strengthened, the property trust requires family ownership. Eleanor can't sell it without my signature, and you're still family. The implications hung heavy in the air. Before I could respond, my office door burst open. Ryan stood there, tie askew, eyes wild. You can't do this, he said. Mother's been arrested. The charity board is pressing charges. Isn't that enough? I met his gaze steadily. Your mother's legal troubles are her own doing. This is business. Business? He laughed harshly. You're trying to take everything from us. Us? The word tasted bitter. There hasn't been an us since you signed those divorce papers. Henry cleared his throat. Ryan, your mother's actions. Don't. Ryan's face flushed. You've never stood up to her before. Why start now? Because someone should have years ago. Henry placed a set of keys on my desk. The property is yours if you want it, Camille. Eleanor kept your grandmother's recipes locked away in the old kitchen safe. Seemed ashamed to let them stay buried. Ryan stepped forward. Dad, the Adams development is dead. Henry's voice carried a finality I'd never heard before. Samantha's father pulled out this morning. Seems he's worried about guilt by association. The news hit Ryan like a physical blow. Everything Eleanor had orchestrated, his career, his future, his arranged marriage, crumbling like ancient mortar. I'll need time to review the lease, I said, watching Ryan's face, and I'll want my lawyer to look it over. Of course, Henry nodded. Take all the time you need. After they left, I sat in my quiet office, running my fingers over the old keys. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Eleanor's replacement charity board meeting tomorrow. Thought you might want to attend. I smiled, remembering Eleanor's face as she was led away from the country club, but the victory felt hollow somehow, like winning a game I never wanted to play. That evening, I drove to the old restaurant. The kitchen's industrial equipment stood silent under dust covers, but the bones were good. I found the safe behind a false panel, just where Henry said it would be. Inside, wrapped in yellowed parchment, lay my grandmother's handwritten recipes, the same ones Eleanor had declared too common for Thompson family gatherings. I thought I'd find you here. I turned to find Linda in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. Henry called, she explained, handing me a cup. Said you might need a friend tonight. I'm not sure what I'm doing anymore, I admitted. This started as revenge, but now it's about choosing who you want to be. Linda surveyed the kitchen. Someone who destroys, like Eleanor, or someone who creates? The recipe pages crinkled in my hands. Family history Eleanor had tried to erase, just like she'd tried to erase me. I'm keeping the restaurant, I decided, but not to spite Eleanor, because my grandmother believed food brings people together, even when they're falling apart. Linda smiled. That's the Camille I know. My phone buzzed again, Ryan calling. But this time, instead of ignoring it or answering with anger, I felt something different. Pity, maybe. Or freedom. I let it ring as I walked the empty dining room, imagining tables filled with laughter, families making memories, life moving forward instead of staying trapped in Eleanor's perfectly controlled past. Tomorrow, I'd call my lawyer. Tonight, I had recipes to read and a future to plan, one that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with reclaiming what was mine all along. The restaurant's opening night should have been my triumph. Instead, I stood in my grandmother's kitchen watching everything fall apart. 3 servers had called in sick. Eleanor's doing, no doubt. The wine delivery was mysteriously delayed. And now this. What do you mean the health inspector is here? I hissed at Linda, who'd volunteered to help manage the front of house. We passed inspection last week. Anonymous complaint, she said. They're required to investigate. Through the kitchen window, I could see the dining room filling up. Jessica had brought half the charity board. Food critics from 2 major papers sat at corner tables. Even Henry was there, sitting alone with an untouched glass of wine. Chef wants to know about the modified menu. My sous chef called out. With the missing deliveries. The kitchen door swung open. Ryan stood there, looking uncomfortable in his suit. Cam, we need to talk. Now. I'm a little busy. I turned back to the stove, checking the sauce that had taken 3 hours to perfect. My grandmother's recipe. Mother's being released tomorrow. The wooden spoon slipped from my hand, clattering against the tile. What? The charges were reduced. She made a deal. He stepped closer. She wants the restaurant, Cam. Says she'll drop the wrongful accusation lawsuit if you sell. Wrongful accusation? The sauce began to bubble, ignored. She embezzled that money. We have proof. We had proof. The documents disappeared from the police evidence room this morning. Of course they had. Eleanor's influence reached everywhere, like poison in water. The health inspector appeared in the doorway, clipboard ready. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of Samantha speaking urgently to the food critics, her perfect smile promising secrets about the kitchen they'd want to hear. Chef! My sous chef's voice carried panic. The seafood delivery. Something's wrong. It's all spoiled. The room spun. Every carefully laid plan, every moment of preparation, crumbling like overcooked pastry. I gripped the counter, feeling the smooth surface my grandmother had once used to roll out pasta dough. You should have known better than to challenge her, Ryan said softly. Mother always wins. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the scared little boy who'd never learned to stand up to his mother, who'd sign divorce papers rather than fight, who'd rather destroy than disappoint. Get out of my kitchen. Cam, get out. The health inspector cleared his throat. Mrs. Thompson, I'll need to see your refrigeration logs. Through the window, I watched the dining room grow restless. Water glasses remained unfilled. Empty bread baskets sat like accusations on white tablecloths. Linda appeared at my side. Tell me what you need. I closed my eyes, remembering my grandmother's voice. A kitchen is a battlefield, Piccola, but we fight with love, not fear. Get me Jessica, I said, opening my eyes, and call that seafood supplier in the next town, the one Eleanor doesn't own. Already did. They're 30 minutes out. I turned to my staff. Modified menu. We're going rustic. My grandmother's emergency recipes, the ones that fed an entire village during wartime. The health inspector raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Thompson, about those logs. Check everything, I said, rolling up my sleeves, because when you're done, I want it on record that we passed. Again. He blinked, surprised by my certainty. The next hours blurred into a symphony of chaos. We transformed the menu into something simpler, deeper. Every dish carried a story, not of revenge, but of survival, of making beauty from whatever remained. Near midnight, as the last critics left looking surprisingly satisfied, I found Henry still at his table. Eleanor called, he said. Wanted to know if her plan worked. Did it? He smiled, pushing a folder across the table. I had copies made of everything. The real ones never reached the evidence room. My hands shook as I touched the folder. Why? Because Eleanor didn't just try to destroy you. She destroyed every woman who ever threatened her control, including my mother. He stood. This restaurant was her prison. Now it's your fortress. I watched him leave, the folder heavy in my hands. Tomorrow, Eleanor would come home, expecting to find ruins. Instead, she'd find me, standing in my grandmother's kitchen, ready for war. Eleanor swept into my restaurant like she owned it, wearing prison like it was merely an inconvenient vacation. The lunch crowd fell silent as she made her way to my grandmother's old table, her calculated entrance perfectly timed for maximum impact. I kept cooking. Through the kitchen window, I watched Samantha slip in behind her, less confident now that her perfectly planned future had crumbled. The Adams development was dead, taking her father's reputation with it. Amazing what a few anonymous tips to the SEC could accomplish. Mrs. Thompson requests your presence, one of my servers announced. Does she? I plated the osso buco, my grandmother's recipe. Tell her she's welcome to order from the menu like everyone else. Minutes ticked by. Eleanor sat, untouched water glass collecting condensation. The dining room hummed with whispers. The fallen queen's return making for delicious gossip. The kitchen door swung open. Ryan. Mother's trying to save face, he said. Just hear her out. Like you heard me out before signing those divorce papers? He flinched. I have the original documents, the ones that prove everything, the embezzlement, the blackmail, all of it. I'm ready to testify. I set down my knife. Why now? Because I'm tired of being afraid. Through the window, I saw Henry enter, taking his usual corner table. Jessica and half the charity board occupied the center tables, vultures circling wounded prey. I wiped my hands and stepped into the dining room. Eleanor's smile remained perfect, practiced. Darling, she said, we should discuss terms. Terms? I sat across from her. For what? Don't be coy. You've made your point. Now it's time to be reasonable. Reasonable. I tasted the word. Like when you tried to replace me, or when you sabotaged my opening night. I protected this family's interests. Her voice hardened. Everything I did was for Ryan's future. No. Ryan's voice carried across the room as he approached our table. Everything you did was for control. Eleanor's smile faltered. Darling, you don't understand? I understand perfectly. He placed a folder on the table. So does the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. The color drained from Eleanor's face. Samantha stood abruptly, her chair scraping against hardwood. You wouldn't? Eleanor whispered. I'm your mother. Yes, Ryan said, and that's why I waited so long to do this. I watched Eleanor's carefully constructed world collapse in real time. Her eyes darted around the room, seeking allies, finding none. Even Henry stayed seated, sipping his wine. I can still fix this, she said, reaching for her phone. I have connections. Not anymore. Jessica approached, steel beneath her smile. The charity board voted this morning. Unanimous decision. Eleanor's hand trembled. After everything I've built, you built nothing, I interrupted. You took, from the charity, from your family, from everyone who threatened your control, including Ryan's grandmother. What? Ryan turned to Henry, who finally stood. Why do you think this restaurant was empty so long? Henry's quiet voice carried. Your grandmother's success threatened your mother's position in society, so Eleanor drove her out, just like she tried to do to Camille. The truth hung in the air like smoke, acrid and choking. Eleanor's perfect mask cracked, revealing something almost human underneath. I did it for us, she whispered. Everything was for us. No, Mother. Ryan's voice gentled. Everything was for you. Two men in suits appeared at the entrance. FBI, right on schedule. Eleanor saw them and something in her broke. You'll fail without me, she said, but her voice wavered. You all need me. I stood, straightening my chef's coat. Actually, Eleanor, we don't. But you're welcome to order takeout when they allow outside food in federal prison. As they led her away, I caught a glimpse of real fear in her eyes. Not of prison, but of irrelevance, of losing the power she'd spent a lifetime building. Ryan stayed behind as Samantha fled, and the crowd dispersed. He stared at the empty chair where his mother had sat. I don't know who I am without her influence, he admitted. I touched his shoulder briefly. That's the point. Now you get to find out. Through the window, the afternoon sun painted shadows across my grandmother's old kitchen. Her recipes had survived, her legacy restored. Some victories, I realized, taste better than revenge. The letter from Eleanor arrived on a busy Thursday, carried in with the morning's produce delivery. I recognized her precise handwriting, unchanged by 6 months in federal prison. The envelope sat unopened beside the prep station while I worked, its presence heavy as a cast iron pan. Linda found me on the roof garden at sunset, tending to the herbs my grandmother had once grown here. The unopened letter rested between us like a landmine. The review's out, she said, sliding her tablet across the table. 5 stars. They called it a triumph of tradition and innovation. I brushed soil from my hands. Eleanor would hate that description. Good thing it's not her restaurant. The city stretched before us, lights flickering on one by one. Somewhere out there, Ryan was building his first independent project, affordable housing of all things. Henry had finally sold their mansion, downsizing to a cottage near the beach. Life moved forward with or without Eleanor's permission. You should read it, Linda said, nodding at the letter. I know. The dinner rush came and went. I cooked, tasted, adjusted. Each dish carried a story. My grandmother's resilience, my own transformation, the complex recipe of justice and mercy that had brought me here. Near closing, Henry appeared at the kitchen door. She's being transferred next week, minimum security. I nodded, piping rosettes onto a row of desserts. I heard. She asked about the restaurant. My hand stayed steady. Did she? Said she finally understood why your grandmother fought so hard to keep it. He paused. She's different now, smaller. The letter sat in my pocket, growing heavier by the hour. After Henry left, I climbed back to the roof garden. The herbs released their scent in the night air: rosemary, thyme, basil, my grandmother's legacy flourishing again. Finally, I opened the letter. Eleanor's words were different from her usual carefully crafted manipulations. She wrote about regret, about fear, about the suffocating weight of maintaining perfect control, about watching her son become himself without her influence, about understanding, too late, the difference between power and strength. The last line caught in my throat. You won by letting go of revenge. I lost by holding on too tight. My phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. Mom's letter? Just read it, I replied. Me too. Dinner tomorrow? I stared at his message. We'd been careful these past months, rebuilding something new from the ashes of our marriage. Not romance, but understanding, maybe even friendship. Your grandmother's carbonara, I texted back, but you're doing the dishes. His response came quickly. Deal. Below, the kitchen staff was cleaning up, their laughter drifting upward. Jessica and Linda's voices carried from the bar, discussing next month's charity event. The restaurant hummed with life, with possibility. I pulled out my grandmother's old recipe book, its pages soft with use. A photograph slipped out, Eleanor and Henry's wedding day. They looked young, unguarded. On the back, in my grandmother's handwriting, love without control, power without fear. Standing at the roof's edge, I tore Eleanor's letter into tiny pieces. The wind caught them, carrying away her confessions, her regrets, her surrender. But I kept the photograph, tucking it back into the recipe book. Some might call it weakness, keeping this small piece of the past. But I'd learned that true strength isn't in destroying every trace of what hurt you. It's in choosing what to preserve, what to transform, what to release. The kitchen below needed my attention. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new recipes, new chances to choose between control and freedom. But tonight, in my grandmother's garden, under stars that had witnessed both triumph and defeat, I finally understood. The best revenge isn't in making others small. It's in growing so large that their shadows can no longer reach you. I closed the recipe book and headed downstairs. There was work to do, stories to cook, life to savor. And somewhere in a minimum security prison, Eleanor Thompson was learning what I'd discovered in this very kitchen. Some ingredients can't be controlled. They can only be transformed.
The land had been in my family for 4 generations, stretching across 35 pristine acres of rolling hills and ancient oaks. When grandfather called to offer Ryan and me a piece of it to build our dream home, I felt the weight of legacy pressing into my chest like a stone. I won't live forever, Madeline, he said, his voice crackling through the phone. And I'd rather see you build something beautiful here while I'm still around to enjoy it. I gripped the phone tighter, pacing across our cramped apartment kitchen. Are you sure about this? It's too much. Nothing's too much for family. He paused and I could picture him sitting in his worn leather chair, looking out over the property. Besides, that corner plot by the creek has been waiting for something special. Ryan walked in just as I hung up, his face lighting up when I shared the news. But his smile faltered slightly, a shadow I should have paid more attention to. We should tell my parents, he said, already reaching for his phone. That's where it all started to unravel. Gloria arrived at our apartment the very next day, uninvited and armed with a folder full of house plans she'd apparently been collecting. She spread them across our coffee table like a general planning an invasion. Now, if we're smart about this, she said, tapping a finger against a particularly elaborate blueprint, we can build something that accommodates all of us. All of us, I echoed, my coffee turning bitter in my mouth. Well, your father-in-law and I have been thinking about downsizing, Gloria continued, her voice honey-sweet, but her eyes sharp as needles. And with the market being what it is, It just makes sense to pool our resources. We could build a proper family compound. Ryan shifted beside me, his shoulder touching mine but somehow feeling miles away. Mum, we haven't even started planning yet. That's exactly why this is the perfect time. She pulled out more papers, financial projections, cost analyses, all meticulously prepared. We could contribute significantly to the construction costs. It's a win-win situation. I watched my dream home transform into a nightmare before my eyes. The quiet mornings I'd imagined, drinking coffee on our private porch, shattered under the weight of Gloria's plans. Ryan's hand found mine, squeezing gently, but I couldn't squeeze back. We'll need to think about it, I managed to say, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. Gloria's smile tightened. Of course, dear, but don't think too long. Frank and I need to make decisions about our house soon. After she left, Ryan tried to reason with me. It could work out, he said, his voice soft but pleading. They'd help with the costs, and it's not like they'd be in our space all the time. I stared at the plans she'd left behind, at the carefully drawn lines that would box us in forever. Your mother's never needed walls to invade our space. Madeline, no. I stood up, gathering the papers into a pile. This was supposed to be our fresh start, our home, not another extension of your parents' control. They're family, he said, as if that explained everything, as if that excused everything. I walked to the window, looking out at the city sprawl, thinking of grandfather's land waiting for us, waiting for me to make a choice that would shape the rest of our lives. Family doesn't always mean living together, I said finally. Sometimes it means knowing when to keep your distance, but I could already feel it. The subtle shift in the air, the way Ryan's silence spoke volumes. Gloria had planted her seeds of manipulation, and they were already taking root. I just didn't know then how deep they would grow, or how much I would have to sacrifice to tear them out. The architect's office felt too small with Gloria hovering over my shoulder, pointing at every detail on the preliminary sketches. 2 weeks had passed since her announcement about moving in, and somehow she'd managed to insert herself into every planning meeting. The master suite needs to be on the ground floor, she said, tapping the paper. Frank's knees aren't what they used to be. I dug my nails into my palm under the table. We're looking at the wrong plans. These are for the main house. Ryan and I wanted to discuss the cottage design first. The architect, James, glanced between us. I have those right here. Oh, sweetie, Gloria cut in, her laugh like wind chimes in a storm. We've moved past that idea. It makes much more financial sense to build one larger home. Right, Ryan? Ryan sat at the end of the table, suddenly fascinated by his phone screen. The silence stretched until I wanted to scream. Actually, I said, forcing my voice steady, we haven't moved past anything. The cottage was our original plan, and it's what we can afford. Gloria's smile tightened. That's why we're offering to help. Frank and I have excellent credit, and with our contribution— What contribution? The words shot out before I could stop them. We haven't seen any actual numbers from you. No bank statements, no proof of funds, nothing. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Ryan finally looked up, his face pale. Madeline, maybe we should discuss this at home. Yes, Gloria agreed, gathering her designer purse. This isn't the place for such conversations. I'll stop by tomorrow with all the paperwork. But I knew she wouldn't, just like she hadn't the last 3 times she'd promised. Later that night, I found Ryan in our home office, staring at spreadsheets. The blue light from his monitor cast shadows under his eyes. The numbers don't work, he said without looking up. Even with both our salaries, we can barely afford the cottage. A house big enough for 4 adults would be— Impossible, I finished, unless your parents really do contribute half. He rubbed his face. Mum says they're just waiting for their house to sell. Have they even listed it? His silence was answer enough. I moved behind him, placing my hands on his shoulders, feeling the tension there. Ryan, we need to be realistic. Your mother is— My phone buzzed. A text from Gloria, to our family group chat. Great news! Lisa's house just sold. She'll need a place to stay while looking for a new home. So glad we're building plenty of space. Ryan's phone lit up seconds later. I watched his expression shift as he read the message, watched the conflict play across his face like shadows. She can't just... I started, but the words died in my throat as more messages flooded in. Lisa, you guys are literally lifesavers. The kids are so excited. Frank, family takes care of family. Gloria, we'll all be together just like when you were children. My hands dropped from Ryan's shoulders. Did you know about this? Mom mentioned Lisa was having trouble selling her house, but I didn't think that she'd invite her to live with us. In our house? The house we haven't even started building yet. He stood up, reaching for me, but I stepped back. It would just be temporary, he said, but his voice wavered, until she gets back on her feet. I walked to the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. Behind me, Ryan's phone kept buzzing with more messages, more plans being made without our input, more of our future being carved up and distributed among his family. Your mother's not waiting for their house to sell, I said finally. She never intended to sell it at all. This was her plan from the beginning, to take grandfather's gift and turn it into her own private compound. That's not fair, Ryan protested, but it was weak, uncertain. I turned to face him, something cold and hard crystallizing in my chest. No, it's not fair. None of this is fair. And I'm done pretending it is. The look on his face told me he knew what was coming next would change everything. He just didn't know how much. The real estate listing appeared in my social media feed like a slap to the face. Gloria and Frank's house, the one they supposedly needed to sell to help finance our new home, wasn't just unlisted, it was being renovated. I stared at the contractor's Facebook post, complete with before and after photos of their kitchen remodel. Another beautiful upgrade for our favorite repeat customers. The timestamp showed it was posted 3 days ago. My hands shook as I drove to my parents' house, needing somewhere safe to process this betrayal. Mom was in the garden when I arrived, her hands deep in soil, but one look at my face and she was leading me inside. They're spending thousands on renovations, I said, showing her the photos, while Ryan and I are drowning in construction estimates, trying to figure out how to afford a house big enough for their entire family. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. Have you shown this to Ryan? He's at work, at the job he took specifically to earn more for this house. I laughed, but it came out wrong, twisted. A house that's becoming a Carter family compound, funded entirely by us. Madeline, Mom's voice was gentle but firm. Your father and I can help. We've been talking about it. No, the word came out sharp enough to make her flinch. I won't let Gloria's manipulation cost my family money too. We're not doing it for Gloria. We're doing it for you and Ryan. That's exactly what Gloria's counting on. I stood up, pacing. She knows someone will step in to fix this. That's how she operates, creates problems and waits for others to solve them. My phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. Mom's coming over tonight to discuss finances. Says she has good news. Another buzz. Gloria. Bringing dinner. And wait until you see the new plans I found. I need to go, I told Mom, already heading for the door. I have to get home before you can think this through. She caught my arm. Honey, you're angry, rightfully so, but don't do anything rash. I'm done being careful, I said, pulling away. Done pretending everything's fine while she dismantles our future piece by piece. I made it home just as Gloria's car pulled up. She emerged with takeout bags and a portfolio stuffed with papers, her smile bright and brittle. Perfect timing, she chirped. Ryan's stuck in traffic, but we can get started. I held the door open, watching her sweep into our apartment like she owned it, like she owned us. Before we look at anything, I said, closing the door quietly, I'd love to hear about your kitchen renovation. Gloria froze halfway to the dining table. My what? I pulled up the contractor's post on my phone and held it out. The one you had done this week, it looks expensive. Oh, that, she waved dismissively. Just a few necessary updates before we sell. Buyers expect you're not selling. The certainty in my voice made her turn. You never were. You've been lying to us for weeks, making promises you never intended to keep. Now, Madeline, no. I stepped closer. You've manipulated Ryan, invaded our marriage, and tried to hijack my grandfather's gift. And for what? So you can maintain control over your son. Her face hardened. Everything I've done is for this family. Ryan understands that, even if you don't. Ryan understands guilt. He understands obligation, because that's what you've taught him. The sound of keys in the door made us both turn. Ryan walked in, looking between us with growing alarm. What's going on? I handed him my phone without a word, watched his face as he scrolled through the photos, as understanding dawned. Mum? His voice cracked on the word. What is this? It's not what you think, Gloria started, but I cut her off. Show him the plans, I said, the ones you brought tonight. Show him how you are going to convince us to take on a mortgage we can't afford, while you sit in your newly renovated house and play puppet master with our lives. The portfolio slipped from her hands, papers scattering across the floor. In the silence that followed, I could hear the sound of everything breaking, Gloria's facade, Ryan's illusions, and maybe, just maybe, the chains of manipulation that had bound us for so long. The construction loan paperwork sat unsigned on our kitchen table when Lisa burst through our front door without knocking. Her mascara was smeared, 2 kids trailing behind her like bewildered ducklings. Mom said I could stay here, she announced, dropping a duffel bag on our floor. Just until the divorce is final. I gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. Lisa, we haven't even broken ground yet. Oh. She blinked, looking around our apartment as if seeing it for the first time. But Mom said. Ryan emerged from our bedroom, his face a mask of confusion. What's going on? Your sister's moving in, I said, my voice eerily calm. Apparently. The kids, Emma and Jack, aged 7 and 5, were already exploring, their small hands touching everything. Lisa collapsed onto our couch, fresh tears starting. Jason's lawyer served me papers today. He's claiming I'm an unfit mother. She buried her face in her hands. I need somewhere stable to live, or I could lose custody. Ryan moved toward his sister, ever the protector. Of course you can stay. Right, Madeline? The look he gave me was pleading, desperate. The same look he'd given me when Gloria needed money for her emergency last month. When Frank needed help with his medical bills the month before that. My phone buzzed. Gloria. Isn't it wonderful? The whole family together again. I'll bring dinner. We can discuss the new house plans. No. The word came out sharp enough to make Lisa flinch. Madeline, Ryan started, but I cut him off. This isn't happening. Not again. I turned to Lisa. Your mother knew about the custody situation weeks ago, didn't she? Lisa's silence was answer enough. She waited until now, until we were about to sign for the construction loan, to spring this on us, because she knew Ryan wouldn't say no, not with the kids involved. It's not like that, Lisa protested weakly. Then where were you planning to stay before this? What was Gloria's original plan? More silence. Ryan stepped between us. Does it matter? She needs help now. It matters because your mother is using your sister's crisis to force our hand, to make sure we build the bigger house, to trap us all exactly where she wants us. The kids had stopped exploring, sensing the tension. Emma clutched her brother's hand, their eyes wide. You're being paranoid, Ryan said, but his voice wavered. I walked to the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. Behind me, I could hear Lisa sniffling, the kids whispering, Ryan shifting his weight, the sound of my life being rearranged without my consent. 3 bedrooms, I said finally. What? I turned back to face them. That's what we can afford to build. 3 bedrooms, not the 5-bedroom mansion your mother's planning. So either she takes Lisa and the kids in at her newly renovated house or... Or what? Lisa demanded, standing up. We live on the street. or you figure out your own solution that doesn't involve destroying my marriage." Ryan recoiled like I'd slapped him. "That's not fair. None of this is fair." I grabbed my keys and phone. "Your mother orchestrated this whole situation, and you're all playing your parts perfectly." "Where are you going?" Ryan's voice cracked. "To see my grandfather. To tell him what's really happening with his gift." I paused at the door. "And then I'm calling a lawyer." "A lawyer?" Lisa's voice rose. "For what?" "To protect what's mine." I met Ryan's eyes. All of it. The last thing I saw before closing the door was Emma tugging on Ryan's sleeve, asking in her small voice, "Uncle Ryan, why is Aunt Madeline so mad?" I waited until I reached my car before the tears came, hot and angry. My phone kept buzzing, Gloria's messages growing more frequent, more demanding. I switched it off and started the engine. They thought they had me cornered, but they'd forgotten one crucial detail. Sometimes the person you push too far isn't the one who breaks. Sometimes they're the one who pushes back. Grandfather's study smelled of leather and old books, unchanged since my childhood visits. He sat behind his mahogany desk, examining the documents I'd brought, the construction plans, Gloria's emails, Lisa's custody papers, each piece of evidence laid out like a prosecutor's case. "She's quite thorough," he said finally, removing his reading glasses. "I'll give her that." "I need to stop this." My voice sounded hollow, even to me. "But Ryan is caught in the middle." Grandfather leaned back, studying me. Just as Gloria planned, a knock at the door made us both turn. Mom entered, carrying a folder I'd never seen before. "I found them," she said, placing it on the desk. Grandfather opened it, revealing photographs from decades ago. A younger Gloria, standing in front of a house I didn't recognize, arm around a woman who could have been her twin. "Your mother-in-law's sister," he explained. "They had a falling out over their parents' estate. Gloria manipulated the situation until she got everything. The house, the assets, even their mother's jewelry collection." "What happened to the sister?" "Moved across the country, never spoke to Gloria again." He pushed the folder toward me. "History has a way of repeating itself." My phone buzzed. Another message from Ryan. "Please come home, we need to talk." "I can't let her win," I said, gripping the phone tight, "but I can't lose Ryan either." Mum touched my shoulder. "Then don't play her game. Play your own." Grandfather pulled out a legal pad, his pen hovering over the paper. "Tell me what you want, not what you're afraid of losing, what you want to achieve." The answer came surprisingly easy. "I want our home, our life, without Gloria's manipulation. Then let's make that happen." He began writing. "The land is still in my name. We can structure the ownership in a way that protects your interests." "Ryan won't like that." "Ryan needs to choose," Mum said gently, "and you need to be prepared for either choice." My phone buzzed again. "Gloria this time. Family dinner tonight. We need to discuss the situation like adults." A plan began forming, not born of revenge, but of necessity, of survival. "I need a favor," I told Grandfather. "Something that might seem cruel, but—" He held up his hand. "Sometimes kindness looks like cruelty to those who mean us harm." When I left an hour later, I had more than just a plan. I had leverage. The house was full when I returned home. Gloria's car in the driveway, Lisa's kids' shoes scattered in the entryway, the smell of Gloria's signature lasagna wafting from the kitchen. A perfect family tableau. Ryan met me at the door, his face tight with worry. "Where have you been? Mum's been waiting to ambush me." I kept my voice low, steady, like she ambushed us with Lisa's situation. "That's not Madeline." Gloria appeared, all smiles and concern. "We've been so worried. Come, sit down. We need to discuss this as a family." I looked around the room, at Lisa curled on our couch, at Frank avoiding eye contact, at the kids playing obliviously on our floor, at Ryan standing between his mother and me, literally and figuratively. "You're right," I said, pulling out the folder Grandfather had given me. Let's discuss family, starting with what happened to your sister, Gloria. The color drained from her face. How did you? Or we could discuss the trust my grandfather just set up, the one that ensures this land and whatever we build on it stays in my name alone. You wouldn't, she whispered. Wouldn't I? I turned to Ryan. Your mother taught me well, about family, about protection, about getting what you want. The silence that followed was deafening. In it, I could hear the sound of carefully laid plans crumbling, of power shifting, of choices demanding to be made, and somewhere, beneath it all, the whisper of justice finally finding its voice. The rental agreement sat between us on the kitchen table like a loaded gun. Ryan hadn't spoken since I'd placed it there, his eyes fixed on the document that would effectively evict his entire family from our unbuilt home. It's already signed, I said into the silence. By grandfather and me. You did this behind my back. His voice was flat, emotionless, like your mother did everything behind mine. The front door opened before he could respond. Gloria swept in, Lisa trailing behind her with the kids. They froze at the sight of us, sensing the tension. What's going on? Gloria's eyes locked onto the papers. What is that? Our solution. I stood, forcing myself to meet her gaze. We're renting out the house once it's built. To strangers. For at least 5 years. The color drained from Gloria's face. You can't. The land is in my name now, legally protected by a trust. I turned to Lisa. You should call Jason's lawyer. Tell him you're moving back in with your parents, in their perfectly good house. Ryan, Gloria's voice cracked. Say something. But Ryan just stared at the rental agreement, his hands clenched into fists on the table. This isn't about the house anymore, I continued. It's about control, just like it was with your sister Gloria, the one you drove away over your parents' estate. Frank stepped forward for the first time. What sister? The one she never told you about. I pulled out the old photographs. The one she destroyed to get what she wanted. Gloria lunged for the photos, but I held them out of reach. Tell them, Gloria. Tell them how you manipulated everyone then, just like you're doing now. You don't understand, she hissed. I did what I had to do, for family. No. Ryan's voice cut through the tension. You did it for yourself. Hope flared in my chest, until I saw his face. Just like Madeline's doing now. The words hit me like a physical blow. He stood up, looking at me with eyes I barely recognized. You're both the same, he continued. Manipulating, scheming, using family against each other. I can't. He shook his head. I won't choose between you. Ryan, I'm staying at Dave's tonight. He grabbed his keys. Maybe longer. I need space from all of this. Gloria moved to follow him, but he held up his hand. From you too, Mom. From everyone. The door closed behind him with devastating finality. Emma tugged at Lisa's sleeve. Why is Uncle Ryan leaving? No one answered. Gloria sank into a chair, the fight draining from her. Lisa gathered her children, murmuring something about bedtime, and hurried them out. Frank followed, leaving me alone with my mother-in-law. Are you happy now? Gloria's voice was barely a whisper. You've torn everything apart. You did that. But the words felt hollow, meaningless. Did I? She looked up, and for the first time, I saw real pain in her eyes. My sister never spoke to me again. 30 years of silence. Is that what you want for Ryan? To force him to choose until he chooses nothing? I gripped the back of a chair, suddenly unsteady. You gave me no choice. There's always a choice. She stood slowly, gathering her purse. I chose power over family once. Now you have too. Remember that when you're sitting alone in your perfect empty house. She left me standing there, surrounded by the wreckage of my victory. The rental agreement seemed to mock me from the table, its legal language spelling out the cost of winning at all costs. My phone buzzed, a text from Ryan. I love you, but I don't like who we've all become. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. I walked to the window, watching Gloria's car disappear into the gathering storm. The same window where, weeks ago, I dreamed of our future home. Now all I could see was my own reflection, distorted by raindrops, looking more like Gloria than I'd ever admit. 3 days after Ryan left, I found Gloria waiting on grandfather's front porch. She held a manila envelope in trembling hands, her usual polished appearance slightly frayed at the edges. "We need to talk," she said, her voice hoarse, "about your grandfather's trust." I crossed my arms, maintaining my distance. "There's nothing to discuss." "Actually, there is." She pulled documents from the envelope. "I had my lawyer look into the property records. The original deed has some interesting provisions." My stomach tightened, but I kept my face neutral. "What provisions?" "The land can't be divided without unanimous family consent, including Frank's family, who owned the adjacent property 50 years ago." The world tilted slightly. "You're lying." "Am I?" She held out the papers. "Your grandfather's trust is meaningless if the land can't be legally transferred. And guess who tracked down Frank's cousins?" The screen door creaked behind us. Grandfather emerged, leaning on his cane. "I wondered when you'd find that clause, Gloria." She straightened, triumph flickering across her face. "Then you know that you'd do exactly what you did to your sister." He moved beside me. "That you'd dig and scheme until you found leverage. That's why I had the clause removed last month." The papers slipped from Gloria's fingers, scattering across the porch. "What?" "The land transfer was completed weeks ago." He pulled out his own envelope. "These are the updated records, but that's not why you're really here, is it?" Gloria's facade cracked. "Ryan won't answer my calls." "Or mine," I admitted quietly. "He's staying with your sister, isn't he?" Grandfather's question made Gloria flinch. "The one you haven't spoken to in 30 years. "How did you—" "Because she called me yesterday." He handed me his phone. "Ryan found her, wanted to understand what really happened all those years ago." I scrolled through the messages, each one revealing more of Gloria's past manipulations. The property theft, the forged documents, the systematic isolation of her sister, until nothing remained but silence. "I did what I had to do," Gloria whispered. "No." I looked up from the phone. "You did what was easy. Manipulation is always easier than honesty." "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." I stepped closer. "Because I almost became you. Using the trust, the rental agreement, I was ready to destroy everything to win." She backed away, but I continued. "The difference is, I saw what I was becoming. Ryan helped me see it. That's why he left, not to punish us, but to save himself, to break the cycle. He's my son, and my husband, and his own person." I held out the phone. "Your sister wants to talk to you, so does Ryan, but not until you understand what you've done, what we've both done." Gloria stared at the phone like it might bite her. Behind us, Grandfather cleared his throat. "Sometimes, Gloria, losing everything is the only way to find what matters." She reached for the phone with shaking hands. As she read her sister's messages, tears began falling. Real ones this time, not the calculated drops she'd used so often for manipulation. "I don't know how to be different," she whispered. "Neither do I admitted, "but I want to learn. For Ryan, for myself." "The land is still yours," Grandfather said gently. "Both of yours, you and Ryan. What you build on it, whether it's walls or bridges, that's your choice." Gloria looked up from the phone, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. "I don't know how to fix this." "Start with truth," I said. "It's the only foundation worth building on." As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A message from Ryan. "I'm ready to talk, all of us, together." Gloria and I exchanged glances, years of manipulation and counter-manipulation giving way to something fragile and new. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. Sometimes, I realized, the greatest victory isn't in winning the battle, but in choosing not to fight at all. The cottage plans lay spread across Grandfather's kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the windows. 3 bedrooms, not 5. Simple, not grand. Ours, not theirs. Ryan traced the outline of what would be our bedroom. It's smaller than the original design. But it's what we can afford, I said, what we actually need. Gloria sat across from us, her hands wrapped around an untouched coffee mug. She'd been quieter lately, since her sister's visit last week. Their reunion had been awkward, painful, healing, all at once. Lisa found an apartment, she said suddenly, near the kids' school. That's good. Ryan's voice was gentle but firm. She needs her own space. We all do. Gloria's fingers tightened around the mug. Frank and we're keeping our house, but we're learning to knock first. I caught Ryan's slight smile at that. We'd established boundaries over the past few weeks. Hard ones, necessary ones. No unannounced visits, no financial entanglements, no emotional manipulation disguised as help. The foundation work starts next week, I said, changing the subject. Grandfather wants to watch them break ground. He's a good man. Gloria met my eyes. Better than I deserved. Mom, no, let me finish. She pushed away from the table, standing. I spent so long building walls to keep my family close that I couldn't see I was actually trapping us all. But walls can come down. If you're brave enough to take the first brick out. She moved to the window, looking out at the land where our home would stand. I won't ask to live here. I won't ask for anything except the chance to do better. Ryan reached for my hand under the table. I squeezed back, feeling the strength in his grip, the certainty that had returned. We're thinking of putting in a garden, I said. Nothing fancy, just vegetables maybe. If you wanted to help plan it. Gloria turned, hope flickering across her face. I'd like that. The screen door creaked and Grandfather shuffled in, carrying his morning paper. The contractors called. They're ready when you are. Ryan stood, pulling me up with him. Then let's go break ground. We walked together across the property, Ryan and me, Gloria and Grandfather, even Frank, who'd been waiting in his car. The morning air was crisp, full of possibility. The contractor handed me the shovel first. I drove it into the earth where our foundation would be, feeling the resistance, the give. Ryan's hands covered mine on the handle, and together we turned the first soil. Your grandmother would have loved this, Grandfather said softly. She always believed in building bridges, not barriers. I watched Gloria touch the freshly turned earth, something shifting in her expression. Understanding, maybe, or acceptance. The ground here would support walls, yes, but walls designed to shelter, not imprison. We should document this, Frank said, pulling out his phone. First day of construction. We gathered together, the morning sun warming our backs. As Frank counted down for the photo, I felt Ryan's arm around my waist, solid and sure. Felt Gloria's careful distance, not too close, not too far. Felt Grandfather's quiet pride. The camera clicked, capturing the moment. Not perfect, not completely healed, but real. A foundation of truth instead of manipulation, of boundaries instead of barriers. Later, as we walked back to the house, Ryan hung back with me. You okay? I looked at the construction markers, the piles of lumber waiting to become our home. At Gloria ahead of us, walking arm in arm with Frank, leaving us our space. I thought revenge would feel better than forgiveness, I admitted. But I was wrong. About everything? No. I smiled, remembering the journey that had brought us here. Just about how to fight for what matters. The wind rustled through the old oaks, carrying away the last echoes of bitterness. We had chosen our ground, set our boundaries, laid our foundation. What we would build now, that was the real test. But for the first time, I was ready for it. Ready to construct something new from the ruins of what we'd torn down. Not a fortress, not a prison, just a home.
I stared at the pristine white tablecloth, counting the delicate blue flowers embroidered along its edge. Anything to avoid looking at my mother-in-law's face as she calmly suggested I kill my unborn daughter. The Bennett name requires a male heir, Alice. Surely you understand that. Judith's voice carried the same tone she used when discussing wine selections or flower arrangements. Modern medicine gives us options. It would be quick, discreet. The roast beef on my plate had turned to ash in my mouth. Mark's hand found mine under the table, but his grip felt weak, uncertain. I pulled away. "You can't be serious," I managed to say, though my throat had gone desert dry. "I've never been more serious." Judith dabbed her lips with her napkin, leaving a perfect coral smudge. "This family has maintained its traditions for 6 generations. We didn't survive 2 world wars and the Great Depression by being sentimental." I looked at Mark then, searching his face for any sign of the man I'd married 2 years ago. The one who'd spun me around our kitchen when we saw the positive pregnancy test, who'd whispered names into my ear late at night. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. "Mark?" My voice cracked on that single syllable. "Mother has a point about tradition," he mumbled, pushing his peas around his plate. "Maybe we should discuss this privately." The chandelier light caught the crystal wine glasses, throwing prisms across the walls. I watched them dance, remembering how I'd once thought this dining room beautiful rather than suffocating. How I'd believed joining the Bennett family meant security, stability, love. "There's nothing to discuss." I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "This conversation is over." "Sit down, Alice." Judith's voice had lost its polite veneer. "You married into this family knowing our values, our expectations. Don't act surprised now." "Values?" I laughed, and it sounded foreign to my ears. "You're talking about murdering my baby because she's not the right gender. That's not values. That's insanity." "Lower your voice," Mark hissed, glancing nervously at the kitchen door where Maria, their housekeeper, might hear. "Why? Afraid someone might realize what kind of family I've married into?" My hands were shaking as I grabbed my purse. "A family that would rather kill an innocent child than break with tradition?" Judith's face hardened. "You're being dramatic. This isn't about murder, it's about legacy, about duty, something you clearly don't understand." "You're right, I don't understand." I backed away from the table, suddenly desperate for air. "And I don't want to." As I turned to leave, Judith's words followed me like poison. "Think carefully about your next move, Alice. The Bennetts protect their own, but we also know how to deal with threats." I stopped at the doorway, my hand on the frame. "Is that a threat, Judith?" "A reminder. You signed a prenuptial agreement. Walk away now, and you leave with nothing." The laugh that burst from me then was ugly, raw. "Nothing? I already have nothing. Just a husband who won't defend his wife and child, and in-laws who think murder is a reasonable dinner conversation." I made it to my car before the tears came, before the magnitude of what had just happened hit me full force. My phone buzzed. Mark calling, probably to smooth things over, to explain away his mother's words as stress or concern or some other pretty lie. I ignored it, starting the engine instead. As I pulled away from the mansion I'd once dreamed of calling home, one thought crystallized in my mind. They wanted to take everything from me, starting with my daughter. Well, 2 could play that game. By the time I was done, the Bennett family would learn exactly what it meant to lose everything they held dear. 3 missed calls and 12 text messages lit up my phone as I paced our bedroom. Mark's footsteps on the stairs made my skin crawl. I'd been home for an hour, just long enough to pack an overnight bag and grab my important documents. "You're being irrational!" Mark burst through the door, his tie loosened, hair disheveled. Mother didn't mean it the way it sounded. I zipped the bag shut with enough force to break the zipper. "Really? How else should I interpret 'kill your baby'? She's from a different generation. The family name means everything to her." He reached for my arm, but I stepped back. "We can work this out, just sleep on it." "Sleep on it?" The laugh that escaped me was bitter enough to burn. "Like you slept on telling me about your family's obsession with male heirs? Was that something you planned to mention before or after we got married?" His silence was answer enough. I shouldered my bag, but he blocked the doorway. "Move." "Alice, please. You're carrying my child too. Don't I get a say?" "A say?" My voice rose sharply. "You had your say at dinner. You chose your side when you sat there letting your mother plan our daughter's death. That's not fair. You know how mother gets. Sometimes it's easier to..." "To what? Let her win? Sacrifice our child to keep the peace?" I stepped closer, searching his face. "Tell me, Mark. What else would you sacrifice to keep Mommy happy? He flinched. You don't understand the pressure. You're right. I don't understand pressure. I just understand that my husband is too weak to protect his own child. The words hit their mark. His face flushed red, then drained of color. Where are you going? Away from here. Away from you. Away from this sick family and its traditions. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist. You can't leave. Think about what you're throwing away. The lifestyle, the connections, the threats, the manipulation, the casual suggestion of infanticide over dinner. I twisted free. Let me pass. Or what? Something ugly flashed in his eyes. You signed a prenup, remember? Leave now and you get nothing. No alimony, no property, no... Is that what you think I care about? Money? I shoved past him, but his next words stopped me cold. Mother's right. You never did understand our world. Maybe this is for the best. Clearly, you're not Bennett material. I turned slowly. No, I'm not. And thank God for that. My phone buzzed again, Judith's name flashing on the screen. I declined the call, then opened my messages. The latest one made my blood freeze. Consider carefully, dear. The Bennett family has friends in every hospital within 50 miles. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I took a screenshot, then another of the previous threats she'd sent. My marketing background hadn't been completely wasted as a trophy wife. I knew the value of documentation. Your mother's threatening me now. I held up the phone. Want to defend that too? Mark's face went blank. That practiced, polished mask I'd seen him wear at business meetings. She's trying to protect our family's interests. Our family? I pressed my free hand against my stomach. This is our family, Mark, right here. But you're too busy being Mommy's good little boy to see it. I made it halfway down the stairs before he called out, If you leave now, don't bother coming back. I paused, not turning around. Is that a threat or a promise? His silence spoke volumes. I reached the front door, then stopped. You know what the funny thing is? I actually thought you loved me. But you can't love anyone, can you? Not really. You're too busy trying to earn Mommy's approval. The door slammed behind me with satisfying force. In my car, I pulled out my phone again, scrolling through my contacts until I found the one person I could trust. The one person who'd never let me down. Henry, it's Alice. I need your help. My voice steadied as I spoke. And I need everything you know about investigative journalism. It's time the world learned what kind of people the Bennetts really are. Henry's apartment smelled like coffee and old books, a familiar comfort I hadn't realized I'd missed. Files and newspaper clippings covered his dining table. 2 years' worth of Bennett family history spread out like a roadmap of corruption. Look at this! He pointed to a yellowed article. 3 years ago, Mark's cousin Sarah suddenly moved abroad after getting pregnant. No one's heard from her since. My hands trembled as I picked up the clipping. She was carrying a girl too, wasn't she? According to hospital records, Henry's voice hardened, which mysteriously disappeared a week later. I pushed away from the table, bile rising in my throat. The morning sickness wasn't helping, but this was different. This was horror. Pure and simple. My phone buzzed, Tom Bennett's name flashing on the screen. I almost declined, but something made me answer. Alice, don't hang up. His voice was urgent, stripped of its usual casual drawl. Mother's calling an emergency family meeting. About you. Let me guess. They're planning my tragic accident? This isn't a joke. Papers rustled in the background. I'm in Father's study. There's something you need to see. Files about other women in the family. It's worse than we thought. Henry watched me intently as I gripped the phone tighter. What kind of files? Medical records, legal documents, payoffs. Tom's voice dropped to a whisper. Alice, Sarah wasn't the first. There were others. So many others. A sharp knock echoed through the phone, followed by Judith's muffled voice. Thomas? Are you in there? I have to go. Tom's words tumbled out. Meet me at the Blue Door. Tonight, 8 o'clock. Come alone. The line went dead. Henry touched my shoulder. You're not actually considering going? Of course I am. It's obviously a trap. He gestured at the evidence spread before us. They're desperate. They know you're a threat. Or Tom's finally grown a conscience. I grabbed my coat. Either way, I need to know. Then I'm coming with you. No. I touched his arm. If it is a trap, I need you safe. You're the only one who knows the truth, who can expose them if... My hand drifted to my stomach. If they make you disappear like Sarah? His jaw clenched. All the more reason not to go. I have to know, Henry. For her. I pressed my other hand against my belly. For all of them. The Blue Door was a dive bar on the edge of town. The kind of place the Bennetts would never be caught dead in. Perfect for secrets. Perfect for traps. Tom sat in a corner booth, hands wrapped around an untouched whiskey. When he saw me, his face crumpled. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know. All these years I never knew." He slid a USB drive across the table. "Everything's here. Bank transfers, medical records, correspondence. Mother's been systematic about it. Any time a first pregnancy wasn't male, there were complications." My fingers closed around the drive. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I remember Sarah. Because I have a girlfriend Mother doesn't know about, and she's pregnant." His hands shook. "Because someone needs to stop them." The door chimed. Mark walked in, followed by two men I didn't recognize. Tom's face went ash white. "I'm sorry," he breathed. "They followed me. I didn't know." I was already moving, but Mark's voice froze me in place. "Sit down, Alice." He sounded tired, resigned. "Mother was right. You've become a problem that needs solving." The men flanked the exits. Tom wouldn't meet my eyes. I clutched the USB drive, mind racing. There was a back door through the kitchen. I'd spotted it coming in. If I could just... "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Mark stepped closer. "Think of it as a kindness. You clearly can't handle the responsibilities of being a Bennett." I laughed then, sharp and bitter. "No, Mark. I just can't handle being a murderer." The next few seconds would determine everything. My fate, my daughter's fate, the fate of every future woman unfortunate enough to marry into this family of monsters. I took a deep breath, remembering Henry's words. Sometimes the best revenge is survival. Time to survive. The kitchen's back door slammed behind me as I burst into the alley, my heels skidding on wet pavement. Mark's shouts echoed from inside, followed by the crash of overturned chairs. The USB drive burned in my pocket like a live coal. A black SUV idled at the alley's entrance. Behind me, the door banged open again. I ran the opposite direction, ducking between dumpsters, my pregnant body protesting every jarring step. Another SUV appeared at the far end, headlights blazing. My phone buzzed. Henry's message flashed. "Got your location, 2 minutes away. Hold on." A hand grabbed my arm. I spun, ready to fight, but it was Tom. "Fire escape," he hissed, pointing up. "Third floor's empty. I'll stall them." I didn't waste time questioning his loyalty. The metal rattled under my feet as I climbed, Mark's voice carrying from below. "Find her! Mother wants this handled tonight!" Through a grimy window, I made out an abandoned office space. The lock was old, weak. One sharp blow with my elbow and I was inside, glass tinkling behind me. My phone lit up again. Henry calling. I answered in a whisper. "Where are you?" "Northeast corner, blue Honda. They've got the building surrounded, Alice. What's on that drive that's worth killing for?" "Everything." I peered down at the alley. 4 men now, plus Mark, spreading out like hunters. Their whole sick history. Tom said... "Tom," Henry's voice sharpened. "Alice, he's working with them. I just saw him get into Judith's car." The betrayal shouldn't have hurt. I barely knew Tom, but it did. Another Bennett choosing family over conscience. Footsteps on the fire escape. I moved deeper into the shadows, past empty desks and forgotten filing cabinets. A door at the far end probably led to a hallway, maybe stairs. If I could just... "It's over, Alice." Mark stood in the broken window, silhouetted against streetlights. He looked different, dangerous in a way I'd never seen before. Was any of it real? My voice stayed steady despite my racing heart. Us? Our marriage? Or was I just a breeding mare for the Bennett bloodline? "I loved you." He stepped inside. "Still do, but family is everything. You'll understand that soon, when you're a mother. If you let me live that long." "That's up to you." Another step closer. "Give me the drive, come home. We'll say you were emotional, confused. Mother will forgive you, eventually." "Like she forgave Sarah?" He flinched. "Sarah made her choice." "Did she? Or did your mother's friends make it for her?" Sirens wailed in the distance. Mark's face hardened. "Last chance, Alice. The drive or what?" I backed toward the door. You'll add me to the Bennett family's list of tragic accidents? How many are there, Mark? How many women did your mother murder for having the wrong kind of baby? Shut up! He lunged forward. I threw the nearest object, a dusty desk lamp, and ran. The hallway stretched endless and dark, my footsteps echoing. Behind me, Mark's pursuit was silent, methodical. He knew he had me trapped. My phone vibrated. Henry again. Police are 2 minutes out. Keep moving. The stairwell door appeared ahead. I grabbed the handle. Locked. It's done, Alice. Mark's voice came from the darkness. No more running. I turned, pressing my back against the door. You're right. No more running. His outline emerged from the shadows, one hand extended. The drive. Now. You want it? I pulled it from my pocket. Come get it. He approached slowly, cautiously, like I was a cornered animal. In a way I was. But cornered animals are the most dangerous. I trusted you, I whispered. I loved you. I know. His fingers closed around the drive. I'm sorry it has to end this way. So am I. The taser from my other pocket connected with his ribs before he could react. Henry had insisted I take it. Just in case. As Mark convulsed and collapsed, I heard doors bursting open below, voices shouting, footsteps thundering upstairs. I looked down at my husband's unconscious form and felt nothing but cold determination. The real drive was safe with Henry. This one contained something else. Something that would ensure the Bennett family's destruction, one way or another. The truth has a way of surviving, even in the dark. The police interview room felt smaller with each passing hour. Detective Rivera set another coffee in front of me, her face carefully neutral. Mrs. Bennett, we found 3 bodies in the Bennett family crypt. All female, all pregnant when they died. She slid photographs across the table. Your husband's been released on bail. His mother's lawyers are already spinning this as ancient family history. My fingers traced the edge of one photo, a gold bracelet on a skeletal wrist. Sarah wore one just like this. We know. Rivera leaned forward. But without more evidence linking current family members to these deaths, this stays a cold case. The door opened. Henry burst in, ignoring the detective's protest. They're moving against you, now. What? Mark just filed for emergency custody of your unborn child, claiming you're mentally unstable. They've got 3 psychiatrists ready to testify. He dropped a legal document on the table. Judith's judge friends are expediting it. You've got 24 hours. The room tilted. I pressed my hand against my stomach, feeling my daughter kick. They can't. They can. Rivera's voice hardened. And they will unless I give them something bigger. I met Henry's eyes. The drive? Ready to go? But Alice, this isn't just about exposing old crimes anymore. The moment this goes public, they'll destroy you. They're already trying to destroy me. I stood, steadier than I felt. Time to return the favor. My phone buzzed. Tom's number. After his betrayal at the bar, I almost ignored it. But something made me answer. Don't trust the police. His voice was barely a whisper. Mother's got people everywhere. But I found something. Father's real will. The one mother suppressed. It changes everything. Why should I believe you? Because I just found out my girlfriend lost our baby. Mother's friends at the hospital. His voice broke. Meet me at St. Michael's. 1 hour. I looked at Henry, who shook his head. It's another trap. Maybe, I gathered my coat. Or maybe it's exactly what we need. St. Michael's loomed against the darkening sky, its Gothic spires perfect for a family of monsters. Tom waited by the side entrance, looking haunted. Inside, he held the door. The will's hidden in Father's old office. It proves Mother killed him when he threatened to expose her. We climbed dusty stairs to the church offices. Tom's hands shook as he unlocked a door. It's in here somewhere. I saw Mother hide. The door slammed behind us. Judith stepped from the shadows, Mark beside her. Oh, Thomas, she sighed. Still so easily manipulated. Just like your father. Tom's face crumpled. I'm sorry, Alice. They have Rachel. My girlfriend. They said, enough. Judith's voice could have frozen hell. Alice, dear, you've become quite troublesome. But we're willing to be merciful. Sign these papers. She produced a document. Full custody to Mark. a generous settlement, and a non-disclosure agreement. Walk away, live a comfortable life, and my daughter will be raised properly, as a Bennett should be. You mean if she survives birth? The words tasted like acid. How many girls have you murdered, Judith? How many families have you destroyed? I've preserved this family's legacy. Her eyes glittered. Something you never understood. You're right. I backed toward the window, phone recording in my pocket. I never understood how anyone could kill innocent children for power. But now I do. You're not preserving anything. You're just a murderer hiding behind tradition. Mark stepped forward. Alice, please, don't make this harder. Then what? Killing me? Like you killed Sarah? Like you killed all the others? We did what was necessary. Judith's mask cracked, revealing the monster beneath. And we'll do what's necessary now. Perfect. Her confession recorded. I pressed send on the phone, delivering everything to Henry and Detective Rivera. Now I just had to survive the next few minutes. You know what's funny? I smiled, feeling strangely calm. You were so focused on preserving the Bennett name, you never noticed what I was really doing. Judith's eyes narrowed. What? Destroying it, completely. And you just helped me finish the job. Sirens wailed in the distance. Judith's face contorted with rage as she realized what I'd done. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just surviving. It's making sure your enemies destroy themselves. The Bennett family's annual charity gala buzzed with wealth and whispers. From my corner of the ballroom, I watched Judith work the crowd, her perfectly coiffed hair catching the chandelier light. Mark stood beside her, playing the dutiful son, while photographers captured their generous donations to children's hospitals. The irony made me sick. You shouldn't be here. Henry appeared at my elbow, tension radiating from him. The restraining order doesn't start until midnight. I adjusted my dress over my 7-month belly. Plenty of time to deliver their surprise. Alice, his hand touched my arm. They've already frozen your accounts, hired lawyers to paint you as unstable. If you do this, they'll what? Destroy me? Kill me? I watched Judith laugh at someone's joke. They're already trying. At least this way, I take them down with me. The USB drive felt heavy in my clutch. 1 copy to the press, 1 to the police, 1 to every major shareholder in the Bennett empire. All set to send at exactly 9 p.m., when Judith would take the stage for her annual speech about family values. Tom approached, Rachel clinging to his arm like a shield. Mother's looking for you. Good. I stepped forward, but Henry caught my wrist. Wait. His voice dropped. Something's wrong. Security's moving. I scanned the room. He was right. Men in dark suits were positioning themselves near the exits. Did you really think we wouldn't be watching? Mark's voice came from behind me. Checking every guest list? Monitoring every invitation? I turned. His face held something almost like regret. The drives are already uploaded, I said. Set to auto-send. No, they're not! He pulled out his phone, showing an email from my account. Amazing what a court order can do. Your devices, your cloud storage, all accessed and cleared. Mother's very thorough. The room spun slightly. That's impossible. Is it? Judith glided over, her smile razor sharp. Did you think you were the first to try exposing us? That others haven't attempted exactly what you planned? The evidence has been contained? She gestured subtly. Security moved closer. Just like you will be. The private psychiatric facility is quite comfortable, I'm told. Perfect for a troubled mother-to-be. My hand pressed against my stomach. The baby kicked as if sensing my fear. You can't just make me disappear. Of course we can. Judith's voice dripped false concern. A tragic case of postpartum psychosis. These things happen, especially to women under stress. Mark will have full custody naturally. For the child's safety. Henry stepped forward. I won't let... Mr. Mitchell. Judith cut him off. Your newspaper has been informed of your inappropriate relationship with a married, mentally unstable woman. I suggest you leave while you still have a career. The trap had sprung perfectly. Every angle covered. Every escape route blocked. I thought I was so clever, but they'd been 10 steps ahead. Why not just kill me? My voice sounded distant to my own ears. Like the others? Because this is better. Mark touched my cheek, an obscene parody of tenderness. You'll live, knowing our daughter is being raised properly, as a Bennett should be. Knowing you failed to protect her. The room blurred. My knees weakened, but I refused to fall. Not here. Not in front of them. Security will escort you out quietly, Judith said. Unless you prefer a scene? Though that would only reinforce the unfortunate narrative about your mental state. I looked around the glittering ballroom, at the wealthy guests who'd turn away, pretending not to see, at Tom, who couldn't meet my eyes, at Henry, desperate but powerless. Everything I'd planned, every piece of evidence I'd gathered, every ally I'd thought I had, all stripped away in minutes. They'd won. They'd always been winning, and I'd just been playing their game by their rules. But as security approached, something crystallized in my mind. A terrible, desperate clarity. They'd taken everything from me. My marriage, my future, my freedom, and soon, my child. I had nothing left to lose. And people with nothing left to lose make the most dangerous enemies of all. I smiled at Judith, watching uncertainty flicker across her perfect face. The game wasn't over. It was just changing rules. The security guards never saw the flash drive I'd slipped to Rachel during our staged confrontation. While they escorted me toward the exit, she disappeared into the crowd, carrying the real evidence, not the decoy Judith had found. I counted steps. 3, 2, 1. The ballroom's lights cut out. In the sudden darkness, screams erupted, followed by the massive screens behind the stage flickering to life. Sarah's face appeared, young and beautiful, in her last known photograph. "What is this?" Judith's voice cut through the chaos. "Get those screens off!" But more faces appeared. Janet Bennett, 1982. Elizabeth Bennett, 1995. Each with their death dates, their medical records, their accidents detailed in clinical precision. "Security!" Mark's shout echoed. "Get her out!" I wouldn't. Tom's voice rang clear. He stood by the main doors, Rachel beside him, her phone live-streaming everything. "The footage is already going viral. Every news outlet in the country just received copies." The lights flickered back on. Judith stood frozen, her perfect mask cracking as she watched her carefully constructed world implode. "You." She turned to me, fury distorting her features. "You orchestrated this." "No, Judith." I stepped forward, shrugging off the guards. "You did. Every murder, every cover-up, every threat. I just exposed it." The crowd pressed back, creating a circle around us. Phones recorded everything. The Bennett family's darkest secrets laid bare for all to see. "These are lies." Mark pushed through the crowd. "Fabrications from a disturbed—" "Tell that to Sarah's parents." Tom's voice cracked. "Tell that to Rachel, whose miscarriage was no accident. Tell that to every woman whose life you destroyed." "Thomas," Judith's voice turned silk smooth. "Think about what you're doing to this family." "Family?" He laughed bitterly. "You killed my daughter too, Mother. Did you think I wouldn't figure it out? Rachel's complications happened right after I told you she was pregnant." The crowd gasped. Mark's face went ash white. "Mother?" His whisper carried in the silent room. "Is it true? Everything I did was to protect this family." Judith's chin lifted. "To preserve our legacy. You're all too weak to understand." "Weak." I stepped closer. "You murdered innocent women and children because you couldn't bear the thought of losing control. That's not strength, Judith. That's cowardice." She moved faster than I expected. The gun appeared in her hand, aimed at my stomach. "I won't let you destroy everything I've built." The crowd scattered. Security reached for weapons, but froze at her wild-eyed stare. "Mother, don't!" Mark's voice shook. "Please!" "Still trying to play both sides, Mark?" I kept my eyes on Judith. "Still can't choose between your wife and your mother?" "Shut up!" Judith's hand trembled. "You never understood. The Bennett name means something. We protect our own—" "By killing them?" Tom moved closer. "By murdering our children?" "They were weak. Imperfect. I made the hard choices to keep this family strong." "No." Mark's voice changed, hardened. "You made the choices that kept you in power." He stepped between me and the gun. "What are you doing?" Judith whispered. "Choosing." He didn't look back at me. "Finally choosing." "You would betray your own mother? For her?" "No." His voice stayed steady. "For my daughter. For every child you murdered in the name of family." The gun wavered. In that moment of hesitation, security rushed forward. The weapon clattered to the floor as Judith screamed, not in fear or anger, but in the primal rage of someone watching their kingdom crumble. Detective Rivera emerged from the crowd, badge displayed. "Judith Bennett, you're under arrest!" As they led her away, her perfectly coiffed hair now disheveled, her makeup streaked with tears, she looked smaller, ordinary. Just another monster finally exposed to the light. Mark turned to me, his face haunted. "Alice, don't." I stepped back. "You don't get forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever." He nodded, understanding at last. The Bennett legacy was ending. Not with a bang, but with the quiet click of handcuffs and the whir of cameras, documenting every moment of their fall. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just surviving, it's making sure the truth survives with you. The courthouse steps felt colder than they should in September. I watched Judith being led away in handcuffs, her designer suit replaced by prison orange, her perfect posture finally broken. The jury had taken less than 2 hours to reach their verdict. Guilty, on all counts. "Mrs. Bennett," a young woman approached, clutching a photo. "I'm Sarah's sister." My throat tightened. "I have her bracelet. The police released it after—" "Keep it," she touched my arm. "For your daughter, so she'll know what you fought for." As she walked away, I felt my baby kick. 7 months along now, and every movement reminded me why I'd torn down an empire. Mark waited by his car, watching me. He'd testified against his mother, helping secure the conviction, but some betrayals can't be undone. Some choices mark us forever. "Alice," he stepped forward. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness." "You're right. You don't." I met his eyes. "But she deserves a father who's trying to be better." Understanding flickered across his face. "You mean supervised visits after she's born, if you continue therapy and prove you've changed?" He nodded, relief and regret warring in his expression. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." I turned away. "You have a lifetime of choices ahead to prove you're not your mother's son." Tom and Rachel waited nearby, hands clasped. Their loss had sparked their testimony, helping bring down the family that had stolen their child. They'd moved to Seattle last week, starting fresh. "Ready?" Henry appeared beside me, carrying my briefcase. He'd never left, never wavered, even when the Bennett lawyers tried destroying his career. Almost. I walked to the courthouse garden, where a small memorial now stood. Names etched in stone. All the women and children the Bennett family had sacrificed for their legacy. Sarah, Janet, Elizabeth, Tom and Rachel's unnamed daughter. I placed my hand on the cool marble, feeling the engraved letters beneath my fingers. "You won." Henry's voice was soft. "They can't hurt anyone else." "No." I straightened up. "But that's not why I did it." "Why then?" I touched my stomach, feeling my daughter's response. "Because someone had to show them that legacy isn't about names or traditions or power. It's about the choices we make, the people we protect." He stepped closer, his hand hovering near mine. "And what choices will you make now?" The question hung between us, heavy with unspoken possibilities. I'd seen the way he looked at me, the love he'd kept hidden all these years. Patient, unwavering, asking nothing in return. "I don't know yet." I met his gaze. "But I know I want to make them freely. No more chains, no more traditions controlling my future." "Sounds lonely." "No." I took his hand, feeling its warmth. "Not lonely, just undefined, unwritten." The setting sun painted the courthouse gold. Like nature herself was turning the page. The Bennett legacy was ended, their empire dismantled, their secrets exposed. I realized revenge hadn't been the answer I thought it was. The answer was in breaking free, in choosing your own path, your own family, your own definition of legacy. "Come on," I squeezed his hand. "Let's go home. Your place or mine?" His smile held no pressure, no expectations. "Neither?" I looked toward the horizon. "Let's find somewhere new, somewhere we can write our own story." My daughter kicked again, stronger this time. She'd never know the weight of the Bennett name, the poison of their traditions. She'd be free to choose her own path, make her own mistakes, create her own legacy. And maybe that was the greatest revenge of all, not in destroying the old, but in building something new, something better, something free.